American TV series, starting to profit from young Sheldon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Transfer. On a rugged road, a shabby white RV was moving slowly. Perhaps because of its age, this RV suitable for family travel was playing a symphony of squeaks. This movement left no doubt that this car could go on strike at any time. The driver of the RV was a white man in his 40s, dressed in a business suit, with a social welfare institution badge on his chest. In the middle of the badge, in bold font, it said, "Dennis Smith. Mike, it's almost noon. Do you want to stop and eat something?" The middle-aged man Dennis asked sideways, holding the steering wheel with one hand. "Then take a break. You've been driving for more than 10 hours. I'm really afraid that you will accidentally take me into a ditch." A young voice came from the back seat of the car. This RV started from the Minnesota town of St. Paul, and its destination was the city of Telford, Texas. The distance between the two places is not far, nor is it close. It takes 3 or 4 days to drive back and forth. The RV that Mike was riding in left Minnesota yesterday at noon. "Ha, you are Mike Quinn, King, the fearless Quinn. How can you be afraid?" Dennis laughed and complained in an exaggerated tone, but his body honestly pulled the car to the side. It was the middle of August, the hottest time of the year. Dennis opened the door, facing the breeze from afar, wiped the sweat from his head, and said, "This broken car, the air conditioner is broken. It should have been thrown into the garbage heap long ago. Then you should apply for funds from the guild." A teenager, holding a huge travel bag in his hand, came out from the back seat of the RV. Next, Dennis Mike threw the black travel bag to the middle-aged man. "Hey, you are not polite." Dennis caught the travel bag in a hurry and saw the boy get back into the car and could only shake his head helplessly. After a while, the boy came out with a wide-brimmed cowboy hat in one hand and a blanket in the other. Looking at the barren wilderness, the boy pointed to a bald cypress tree not far away and said, "Let's go there to rest." Putting the blanket on the ground, the two sat under the tree. Mike took the travel bag again and took out food from it. Giant hamburgers, giant hot dogs, farm apples. Of course, there were also 2 bottles of St. Arnold beer. Dennis took a bottle of beer, clinked it with Mike, and asked, "If I remember correctly, you are not yet 16 years old, right?" "Well, to be precise, I will be 16 in another 6 months." Mike took a sip of beer and replied, "Of course, the Americans use the virtual age to count years, starting from the father. So, strictly speaking, Mike is only 14.5 years old now." "Okay. Boy, remember, don't tell anyone that you and I drank together in the future." Dennis pulled the tie at the lapel irritably and then took a big sip of beer. The legal drinking age in the United States is 21 years old. Although Texas has relaxed its policy due to regional laws, people still have to be 18 years old to drink. If people knew that Dennis, a public official of the welfare home, had drunk with Mike, he would definitely be sued by the local court. Mike naturally knew the interests involved. He smiled and said, "Let's not talk about such trivial matters. I just want to know why Uncle Dennis didn't take off that ugly coat on such a hot day." Dennis, who is over 40 years old, has become fat, has a big beer belly, and a Mediterranean Sea on his head. The slightly tight black official suit does not look good on him. According to Mike's previous memory, Dennis had this old-fashioned style as early as 3 or 4 years ago. What does a little brat know? As a public official, I must always maintain my respectability. Dennis took a sip of beer and said melancholy, "TSK, the meaningless superiority of middle-aged people is really pitiful." Mike said venomously, "Hey, you are getting more and more venomous. If you weren't so cute, I would have beaten you up." Dennis scolded with a smile and waved his arms meaninglessly to show his strength. "Dennis, I'm not saying anything bad about you. Look carefully, your grandma must be wrong." Mike raised his eyebrows, fiddled with his hair, and smiled brightly. Mike, who is 15 years old, is nearly 1.8 meters tall, and the childish look on his face is gradually fading. With a smooth jawline and regular facial features, Mike has a face that is not inferior to that of young Leo. Okay. Cute is really not suitable for you anymore. You are now handsome guy. Dennis had a speechless expression, and then he retorted, if you weren't so handsome, Jennifer wouldn't have found a junior like you. As soon as the words came out, Dennis thought it was not good, and apologized quickly. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned her. A correct version is available at 1619 Book Bar. Mike didn't react as violently as Dennis thought. He said calmly, it's okay. No one would have thought that would happen. Jennifer, devil, sacrifice. These words have become a taboo in the small town of Minnesota. The original Mike Quinn had actually been killed by the beautiful senior. The resurrected Mike, after many calculations, accidentally killed the senior Jennifer outside the altar of the abyss on a dark and windy night, and the body was thrown into the abyss. The death of the person is extinguished, and the grudges are gone. Mike's revenge was done secretly, and the matter was handled cleanly, so naturally no one found any follow-up problems. What Mike didn't expect was that although Jennifer disappeared, the impact she caused was still great. In order to calm the matter, the local seniors considered it many times and finally persuaded all the relevant people like Mike to withdraw. Mike was an orphan and had the inheritance rights of a small farm. Originally, he could live a stable life, even if he didn't continue to go to school. However, no one knows what Mike's deceased parents thought. If Mike wants to get their inheritance and a fixed monthly living allowance, he needs to meet the two requirements of graduating from high school and being over 18 years old. For the sake of life, Mike had to bow his head, and with the help of the local welfare home, he embarked on this transfer journey. As for why he went to the small town of Telford, Texas, as far as Mike knows, there is an old woman named Connie there who has some relationship with his deceased grandmother and is willing to accept him as a unlucky guy. Mike, I have already inquired about it. Ms. Connie is a very nice person. If you go to her, you can start a new life. Dennis patted Mike on the shoulder, sighed slightly, and comforted him. Believe me, everything will be fine. In fact, in Dennis's heart, Mike is still just a child. And the other party is an orphan, and now he has to leave his hometown, which makes people worry. Chapter 2. Visitors from the town. Because of the hot weather, Dennis had no appetite, and almost all the food he took out went into Mike's stomach. Dennis, we don't need to be so anxious. If I remember correctly, your company should have approved you for more than a week of leave for this official business trip, right? Mike finished the big hamburger in his hand and chatted. If I can settle you down earlier, I can go back earlier and spend more time with your Aunt Kelly for 2 days. Dennis responded while collecting household garbage. Hey, your words are so corny. Mike pretended to shake off the goosebumps on his body, then drank the beer next to him in one gulp, and then threw the empty bottle into the distance with all his strength. Amid Dennis's complaints, Mike picked up his travel bag and ran happily towards the RV. Smelly boy, your personality is getting more and more cheerful. Dennis looked at Mike's back, and a smile appeared on his stern face. 4 years ago, after Mike's parents died in an accident, Dennis became the legal guardian of little Mike. Because of family reasons, Mike had always been a bit introverted. Dennis was worried that Mike would become more silent after the Jennifer incident. However, judging from Mike's current performance, he seemed to have walked out of Jennifer's shadow. This situation made Dennis feel relieved that his child has finally grown up. After a sigh like an old father, Dennis also carried the garbage bag and walked towards the RV. Not long after, the little broken car set off again with a babble. Mike lay back in the back seat, covering his face with a cowboy hat. He looked like he was sleeping, but his consciousness was actually in the system. Yes, as a time traveler, how could Mike not have a system by his side? Host of the pickup system, Mike Quinn, Zaokun, intelligence 128 plus, normal 92 110, excellent 110 to 120, very excellent 120 to 140, genius 140 plus, constitution 107 plus, normal adult male is 100, skills, driving LV3, 67 over 10,000, shooting LV2, 233,000. Cooking LV2, 191,000. Skills are divided into 5 levels / more skills can be seen by expanding. Characteristics, demon body, 1. Immortality 2. Eternal youth 3. Fast healing. Note, the immortality here does not mean immortality. If the brain or heart is severely damaged, it will still die. Similar characteristics can be superimposed and fused. After about a month of exploration, Mike has almost figured out his own system. That is, by changing the emotions of others, attribute points, skill proficiency and various characteristics will be randomly dropped. Simple and crude. Moreover, according to Mike's initial guess, the protagonists of this world seem to be more likely to drop good things. Just like the demon body, Mike accidentally picked it up when Jennifer died. After system optimization, Mike's demon body can be used by taking in normal food, but he does not need to eat people like Jennifer. Squeak. Just as Mike was observing the system, the scratching sound of the RV body woken him up. Fortunately, some collisions did not affect the use of the RV. The scratching sound just now should be the car hitting the curb. Mike looked up, and sure enough, Dennis's tired eyes appeared in the rear view mirror. "Hey, Dennis. Why don't you take a rest and let me drive?" Mike said seriously. Dennis was brought back to his senses by Mike's call, and his brain started working again. He refused outright. "No, you are not old enough to get a driver's license, and it is against the rules to let you drive. Dennis, think about it again. You just drank alcohol before, which is drunk driving. Driving until you are unconscious at night is fatigue driving. Do you need me to call the police for you?" For the safety of both of them, Mike refuted him. The two people's eyes met in the rear view mirror. In the end, Dennis was defeated, stopped the car, and said, "Okay, you are right. You drive. I will help you watch from the passenger seat." Mike drove the RV as he wished. With the third level driving skills, he naturally drove the car fast and steadily. Dennis leaned on the passenger seat and wanted to give Mike a few words. But seeing that Mike drove steadily, he snored in the chair after a while. There are not many forks on the interstate highway. After more than 3 hours, Mike followed the road signs and arrived at the town of Telford. The town looked small, and under the setting sun, it was full of simple rural charm. Mike asked for directions several times along the way and drove the RV to the door of 5502. At this time, the door of this independent apartment was tightly closed, but the apartment opposite with 5501 hanging on the door was very lively. "Missy, go and see if our guests have arrived." Father George, who was lying on the sofa watching sports events, heard the movement outside the door and said to his little daughter. A little girl holding a doll ran to the window, looked out, and exclaimed, "Cool, there is an RV parked in front of our house. Is our little Mike here?" An old woman dressed fashionably poked her head out of the kitchen with an expectant look on her face. She was the person Mike was going to rely on, Grandma Connie. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. "Connie, Mary, don't be busy yet. Our little guest is waiting outside the door. George, Missy, go to the room and call little George out. George, Sheldon, don't say anything strange when you see the guest later. Sheldon, I know, isn't it just someone who wants to stay at Grandma Connie's house? Why are you so excited?" After a burst of chaos, George's family and Grandma Connie appeared at the door in an orderly manner. Mike just finished dressing and got out of the RV. Oh, Grandma Connie came up to greet them. She was first surprised at Mike's height and then looked at Mike's face again and again, as if she was identifying something. Finally, she smiled and said enthusiastically, "You should be little Mike. Your eyes are so similar to Elizabeth's, just as charming." The Elizabeth she was talking about was Mike's late grandmother. Mike had guessed it long ago, and he was not too surprised to see that it was really little Sheldon's family and Grandma Connie. He said politely, "I'm Mike Quinn. Are you Connie Tucker?" "It's me. You can call me Grandma Connie or Grandma Connie." Grandma Connie said, remembering that Mike had no family. She moved forward and hugged him, saying, "What a poor child." Well, Mike, who is tall and strong, is actually almost a head taller than Grandma Connie, who is just over 1.6 meters tall. Moreover, Mike has a farm to inherit. No matter from which aspect, he is not actually poor. Missy in the back was already fascinated by Mike's handsome face and happily asked Mary, "Mom, can I marry Mike?" Mary was touched, and when she heard her little daughter's question, She widened her eyes and explained, "Of course not, you are still in elementary school. Missy, then can I marry him after I enter junior high school?" Mary said with a straight face, "Not even in junior high school. Missy, then." Mary, "Not even in high school." What she wanted to say was predicted by her mother, and Missy snorted unhappily. Then, she quietly moved 2 steps towards her father George with the doll in her arms to express her protest to Mary's mother. Chapter 3, Taking Advantage of Others. Grandma Connie, who had let go of Mike, fell into memories and told Mike, "It was more than 30 years ago. I met your grandmother in Las Vegas. She was a beautiful woman with smooth blonde hair. We were killing it in the casino at that time." Seeing that Connie was getting more and more outrageous, Mary hurriedly said, "Mom, look at me. I can't stop when I'm happy." Grandma Connie reacted and realized that Mike was still a child. She smiled apologetically and introduced, "This is my daughter Mary." Mary came forward and hugged Mike affectionately. "This is her husband George." Grandma Connie introduced them one by one. George was a fat middle-aged man. Except for not being bald, he was a bit like Dennis in other aspects. He came forward to shake hands with Mike in a friendly manner and said, "Welcome, Mike." Then, it was the eldest son of the Cooper family, George, who also politely came forward to shake hands with Mike. When Mike came to the little girl Missy, Missy excitedly threw herself into Mike's arms without Grandma Connie introducing her. It was not until Mary's mother's eyes became dangerous that Missy let go of her arms, stepped back, pulled her skirt, and said very ladylike, "My name is Missy. Nice to meet you. My name is Mike, and I'm as happy as you." Mike smiled and nodded to the little girl. Finally, Grandma Connie led Mike to little Sheldon and introduced him. "This is Sheldon, the smartest child in the Cooper family." Little Sheldon, who had an adult-like hairstyle, had a delicate little bow tie on the collar of his shirt. After seeing Grandma Connie introduce himself, he put on the woolen gloves he had prepared long ago, then stretched out his hand and said seriously, "Mike, you look much smarter than little George. I hope we can be friends." At this stage, Mary is worried about little Sheldon's inability to make friends. In order not to worry his mother, smart Sheldon has begun to try to make friends in school, but the results are not ideal. So, he had the idea of making friends with Mike. "Sheldon, do you have misophonia?" Mike did not choose to shake hands. He stared at Sheldon's gloved hands and asked knowingly, "Of course not. I wear gloves, just to prevent bacteria from harming me. You know, people's palms sweat easily, which provides an environment for the growth of various bacteria." Sheldon explained seriously, "Well, Sheldon, from a medical point of view, your situation is misophonia." Mike smiled, stretched out his hand, and then said, "But don't worry, I have washed my hands carefully when I went out." Looking at Mike's slender and clean palms, Sheldon was in a dilemma as to whether he should take off his gloves to shake hands. What a cute child. Seeing Sheldon's tangled little expression, Mike immediately leaned over and embraced him. When he felt Sheldon's body gradually stiffened, Mike smiled and let him go. The hug made little Sheldon's brain stop working. With an embarrassed but polite smile on his face, he asked, "Sorry, I want to know, when did you go out?" Obviously, he was still thinking about the problem of whether there were bacteria on Mike's hands. "Well, let me think about it." Mike pretended to count on his fingers and said seriously, "I probably went out at 12 o'clock yesterday noon." Little Sheldon realized that it had been a day and a half since Mike washed his hands last time. With a horrified expression on his face, he shouted, "Oh my god, bacteria, bacteria." Like a headless fly. After turning around a few times, Sheldon yelled and rushed back to the house behind him. Intelligence attribute +10. Intelligence attribute +5. Mike watched the other party leave, hooked his finger, and caught the 2 light balls dropped by Sheldon in the air. "What a treasure boy," Mike exclaimed in a low voice. One of the 2 light balls fell when he hugged Sheldon, and the other fell when he yelled. Intelligence 143, 128 +15. After the intelligence was increased to 140, it felt very obvious to Mike, just like a single-core computer with a dual-core processor. Some of the unclear memories in the past also emerged in his mind. The sense of pleasure from the increase in intelligence is no less than a life leap. Mike, are you okay?" Seeing Mike standing there in a daze, Grandma Connie stretched out her hand and waved it in front of his eyes. Mike was in a daze because he was receiving complicated information in his mind. When he woke up, he quickly said, "I'm fine, just Sheldon. He is like this. He will be fine in a while. You will get used to it in the future." Grandma Connie explained, and then invited, "You must be hungry. Come into the house and try the secret Texas barbecue I prepared for you." Surrounded by Grandma Connie and Sheldon's family, Mike walked into the house. Sitting at the dining table, Mike always felt like he had forgotten something. A perfect version of the book in 1619. However, there was too much information in his mind before, so Mike didn't think about it for a while. At this time, a middle-aged man in the RV outside the house was still sleeping soundly. During the prayer before dinner, little Sheldon finally came out of the bathroom, but he looked at Mike with a sad look. In the middle of the dining table was a large piece of barbecue specially made by Grandma Connie, and next to it was a sumptuous dinner prepared by the housewife Mary. After a hearty meal, George, the head of the family, sipped his beer and asked, "Mike, how tall are you?" "About 1.8 meters. Mike answered after swallowing the barbecue in his mouth. George Cooper had been a football coach for half his life, and he saw at a glance that Mike was very suitable for this sport, so he continued to ask, "How much do you weigh?" "About 170 pounds, 77 kilograms. Mike has grown very fast recently, so he could only estimate a rough number. "Good physique. You are still young now, and your body will develop again in the future." George's eyes lit up and continued, "Have you played football before?" "That's not the case." Mike shook his head. "It's a pity." George sighed and then invited, "But it's not too late now. Would you like to join my high school football team? With your talent, you will be able to get started quickly. By the way, I'm the head coach of the high school football team." George smiled confidently and then pointed at his eldest son with his chin and said, "Also, George Jr. is also a member of the school football team." "Come on, I'm just a bench player," George Jr. said sullenly when his father mentioned him, as if he was a little dissatisfied. To be honest, George Jr. is about the same age as Mike, but he is only a little over 1.6 meters tall and has a thin body. Compared with his father's big body, George Jr. is not really talented in football. Well, Mike has just arrived. After he gets familiar with the school, he will make his own decision. Mary stopped her husband from bringing up this topic and maintained some dignity for George Jr. Then, she looked at Mike and said in confusion, "Mike, you are not yet 16 years old. How can they let you drive here alone?" "Oh no, Dennis." Mike finally remembered that he had forgotten something and ran out of the door with a cry. At this time, a bald middle-aged man in the RV opened his eyes in confusion. Chapter 4 Enrollment. Melford Middle School is the only public middle school in the town of Telford. Because of the free tuition, this welfare-oriented public middle school is very popular among locals. By the way, Sheldon and George both go to high school in this school. In Grandma Connie's private car, Mike sat in the front passenger seat, while Dennis stayed in the back seat silently. "Dennis, are you still angry about what happened yesterday?" Mike said with his head tilted. "Kang Mang, please believe me, I didn't mean it." Yesterday, Dennis woke up in the car and found that Mike was not there. He was almost scared to death. Later, although he was comforted by Grandma Connie's secret barbecue and George's beer, but since then, he looked at Mike with resentment and was unwilling to talk to him. "You are so old, but you still have a child's temper." Seeing that Dennis still ignored him, Mike shrugged his shoulders and looked helpless. Grandma Connie, who was driving, was amused by the way the two got along. It can be seen that she likes Mike, a handsome and cheerful young man. She smiled and asked, "Mike, do you want to experience the feeling of driving to school by yourself?" "Of course I do," Mike replied. "It's cool, isn't it?" Dennis was sitting in the back seat, listening to the conversation between the two people in front of him, and finally couldn't help but speak up and stop them, saying, "No, Mike, you are not yet 16 years old, and driving a vehicle is illegal." Seeing that Dennis finally spoke, the two people in front looked at each other and laughed happily. Dennis also realized that Mike and the others were just joking. After calming down, he said seriously. "Listen, Mike, I'm not mad at you but at myself. I shouldn't have let you drive the RV. Also, I hope you won't touch the steering wheel before you get your driver's license." Mike knew that Dennis was concerned about him, so he waved to the backseat and said, "Got it." Dennis was relieved, and then he heard Mike ask, "Then Dennis, can I touch the steering wheel when I'm taking the driver's license test?" In the principal's office, Principal Tom, who was nearly 60 years old, held Mike's transfer file in his hand. Seeing that the reason for the transfer was not written on the file, Principal Tom asked in confusion, "Can you tell me specifically why Mike transferred?" Dennis was in charge of Mike's transfer affairs, so he said, "Sorry, this is private. I can't give you an answer. But I can assure you that Mike is a sensible and obedient boy. The problem of the transfer is not his fault. He just got unlucky and got implicated." Grandma Connie, who was standing by, didn't know the reason for Mike's transfer, but she still helped and said, "Tom, look at Mike. Does he look like a bad boy? Look outside the door, how popular he is." Because today was a special day, Mike dressed up before going out. The black casual suit, coupled with his handsome face, attracted the attention of the girls. As soon as he appeared on campus, they called their friends and followed Mike like a pilgrimage. After Mike entered the principal's office, they still refused to leave, surrounding the door of the office like ostriches, stretching their necks to look inside. Principal Tom heard Connie's reminder and stood up to look at the door. Sure enough, the entrance was crowded with girls, with excited expressions on their faces, looking back and forth at Mike. American school advocates free education, and high school is the age when students are most outspoken. This group of girls was discovered by the principal for peeping, and they had no intention of hiding it. One by one, they continued to stare at Mike's profile, and laughter came from time to time. "It's terrible." Principal Tom came to the door and looked out. The corridor was full of excited female high school students. Tom dared to say that this was the most popular time in the history of the principal's office. In the office, Dennis turned his head and looked at the crazy girls at the door. He felt ridiculous and patted Mike's shoulder and reminded him, "Mike, you must protect yourself in school in the future." Grandma Connie also felt the same way and said, "Yes, at least remember to bring a small umbrella before being eaten by them." "Connie, he is still a child." Dennis looked at Grandma Connie speechlessly after hearing the content. That was not suitable for children. "Oh, I'm just kidding." Grandma Connie spread her hands to show her surrender. After calming down Dennis, who overreacted, she went to Mike and whispered, "If you need it, you can buy it at the convenience store." The room was so small that Dennis heard what Grandma Connie said. However, this time, he unexpectedly did not refute it. Mike, in fact, did not expect that he would be so charming now. As for Grandma Connie's kind reminder, he pretended not to understand and completely integrated himself into the role of a good child. On the other side, Principal Tom was persuading the girls to leave, but until the bell rang, these girls still showed no signs of leaving. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book bar. Listen, if there is still someone here in 3 minutes, don't blame me for deducting her credits. Principal Tom took out a small notebook and shouted loudly. Sure enough, for high school students, deducting points is very effective. Not long after Tom finished speaking, the girls left the corridor and returned to their respective classrooms. After dealing with the girls, Principal Tom closed the door of his office and sat back in his leather chair. Wiping the sweat off his head, he also looked at Mike's handsome face curiously, with a complicated look, including envy. "Okay, I already know your identity." Principal Tom retracted his envious gaze, took out a set of papers from the drawer, and said, "In 1 hour, if the results are qualified, you can go to the 11th grade. Do you understand?" Understood. Mike politely took the test paper and went to the table beside. After opening the test paper, Mike was a little surprised. This was actually a set of comprehensive test papers for the 12th grade. Mike was originally in the 10th grade in his original high school. After a summer vacation, he should have just been promoted to the 11th grade. Under normal circumstances, the school should have examined his academic performance in the 10th grade. However, looking at the principal's wrinkled face, Mike maliciously guessed it must be his handsomeness that offended the principal, which made the other party ask a difficult question to embarrass him. However, Mike already had courses until college in his mind. After his IQ reached 140 or above, those knowledge points that he should have forgotten were all taken back from his previous teachers. So Principal Tom's little test this time was not difficult for Mike. More than 20 minutes later, the test paper was put in front of Principal Tom again. "Mike, if you think the questions are too difficult, you can ask me for a different set of test papers," Principal Tom said with a little pride. Seeing Mike get the test paper back so quickly, he thought that the other party was stumped by the questions. "No, this test paper is just right," Mike replied confidently. Chapter 5 Separation. Principal Tom held the standard answer in his hand, and after carefully comparing it several times, he finally wrote an A on Mike's test paper. This is a sample test paper for the 12th grade high school graduation exam, which includes mathematics, algebra, geometry, trigonometric functions, natural sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, humanities, world history, American history. Mike almost got full marks on such a complex test paper. Next, as long as he makes up the credits for sports and social practice, he can definitely go to a well-known university. It can be said that he is a potential stock. Have you ever thought about skipping a grade and going directly to the 12th grade graduation class? Principal Tom looked at Mike with more and more eager eyes and said bluntly, "With your grades, you will definitely go to a satisfactory university next year." The reason why Tom said this is because the teaching funds of public middle schools are linked to the teaching quality of the school. If Mike can graduate from this school with excellent grades, the teaching funds of Melford Middle School next year will also increase accordingly. Originally, Melford, with the little genius Sheldon, could already increase education funds. Now there is another Mike, which is naturally double happiness. "Sorry, I want to spend my high school career completely, and I have never thought about skipping a grade," Mike said seriously. As far as Mike knows, little Sheldon, the sleek, will study in high school for 2 years. Mike is now in grade 11, and under normal circumstances, he can stay in Melford for 2 years. It's just right to take advantage of these 2 years to make good use of Sheldon. As for 2 years later, Mike will graduate from high school and be 18 years old and have the right to inherit the family farm. By then, he will have money in his hands and he can consider whether to stay or go. Seeing that Mike didn't want to skip a grade, Principal Tom was not very disappointed. Anyway, the other party is in his own school, and graduating a year earlier or later will not have much impact. After thinking it through, Principal Tom showed a friendly face and said, "I respect your choice, Mike. Enjoy your high school life. Melford Middle School welcomes you." As he said that, Principal Tom stood up and prepared to high-five Mike to welcome him. But Mike's reaction was mediocre, and Principal Tom could only awkwardly retract his hand under the strange gazes of several people. Next, after Principal Tom signed a few documents, he said to Mike, "The admission procedures have been completed. I will find someone to take you to the class so that you can get familiar with our school as soon as possible." Now it has been 2 weeks since the high school started. For a transfer student like Mike, it is considered late. Mike originally planned to go out with Dennis this afternoon to have a good farewell dinner. Seeing that the principal had arranged his schedule so full, he was about to ask for leave. As a result, he saw Dennis shaking his head slightly at him out of the corner of his eye, so Mike had to swallow his words of asking for leave. On the other side, Principal Tom had already picked up the landline. "Ms. Victoria, please come to my office. There is a student here who needs you to take to the class." After hanging up the phone, Tom explained, "Ms. Victoria is the head teacher of the 11th grade. By the way, the little genius Sheldon is in her class. You geniuses must have common topics." While explaining to Mike, Principal Tom glanced at Grandma Connie with a hint of meaning. American public high schools advocate free teaching, and the courses are also divided into elective courses and compulsory courses. Generally, most of the children who come here to study are seriously biased in their subjects just to get a high school diploma. People like Sheldon and Mike, who can get full marks in all subjects, are rare here. Often such students will be taken care of by the school and receive some special treatment. After a while, a tall and thin middle-aged woman pushed open the door of the principal's office. "Is he the new student?" Victoria was wearing an old women's suit and looked old-fashioned. When she saw Mike's handsome face, she frowned slightly and seemed a little impatient. Principal Tom knew that Victoria had a strange personality, so he tried to smooth things over and said, "He is Mike, with excellent academic performance. He will be your student in the future." Then, he introduced, "This is Ms. Victoria, the head teacher of the 11th grade. Victoria glanced at the principal and then said to Mike, "Come with me, you can still catch up with the last class." After that, she walked out of the door on her own. Mike and the other two in the office said goodbye to Principal Tom, who looked a little helpless, and walked out of the office together. In the corridor, Ms. Victoria was folding her arms across her chest, looking at the ground not far away with her head tilted, as if she was waiting for Mike, or as if she was in a daze. "Ms. Victoria, can I say a few words to Mike?" Dennis asked the woman not far away. Now that Mike has successfully enrolled, Dennis's mission has been completed, and it seems that he is ready to leave. Victoria seemed not to hear Dennis's question. She stood there in the same posture, not moving at all. Dennis did not get a response, and felt a little embarrassed. In the 16-9 book, the one book. After finishing the gossip, Grandma Connie raised her voice and said, "I'm going to stay outside. If you want to hitchhike, you'd better hurry up." Dennis then, she waved her hand again, leaving a chic back view for Dennis. Dennis watched her leave, and then said, "Connie will be a good guardian, and the Cooper family is also very good. I can rest assured that you stay here." "Are you going back?" Mike asked. "Yes, I'm going to leave at noon." Dennis explained, "You know, I rarely have time to rest at work. This time, I can take advantage of the free time and go back to spend more time with your Aunt Kelly." The work of the Minnesota Welfare House is semi-public welfare, which can be said to be less money but more work. And Dennis has worked in the welfare house for many years, which is enough to show that he is a kind and caring person. "Have a good trip. Remember to say hello to Aunt Kelly for me when you get back." Mike saw that they were about to part and thought of Dennis's care for him over the past month, so he said, "Also, thank you, Dennis Smelly Boy." Dennis came forward and hugged Mike, saying, "Take care of yourself too. If you have any questions, remember to call me." Listening to Dennis' caring words, Mike knew that he also had a simple concern in this world. After the two said goodbye, Dennis waited until Mike went to Victoria's side before turning around and walking out. Chapter 6 Classroom Storm. When Ms. Victoria brought Mike and pushed open the 11th grade classroom, a math class was in progress. The girls in the classroom all exclaimed when they saw Mike coming in. "Be quiet, this is your new classmate Mike." Victoria suddenly seemed to be stuck and asked sideways, "By the way, what is your full name?" "Mike. Mike Quinn." "Very good, Mike Quinn. Find a seat for yourself." After Victoria arranged Mike, she nodded to the math teacher Ingram on the podium and said, "Ingram, this is for you." After that, Ms. Victoria left the classroom on her own, just like when she came. At American High School, students do not have fixed seats in class. Those students who just want to go through the day naturally occupy the back row. The average person chooses to sit in the middle of the classroom, a less conspicuous position, and those who want to study hard will also sit a little closer to the front. In this class, the special existence of little Sheldon sat alone in the middle of the front row. And because of his personality, the seats next to him were all vacant. Mike looked around the class, and under the expectant gazes of the girls, he walked to the left of Sheldon and sat down. His action also made the girls in the class wail. Math teacher Ingram was a fat woman in her 30s who looked very gentle. She waited until the students in the class were quiet, and then verbally welcomed Mike, and then turned to continue explaining trigonometric functions on the blackboard. Mike's IQ is now over 140, which is less than 1% of the world's high IQ geniuses. He looked at the trigonometric formulas on the blackboard, and then looked at the examples, and felt that these contents were super simple. Moreover, Mike, who had experienced the tactics of the sea of questions, could easily come up with several ways of solving the questions on the blackboard. At this time, Ms. Ingram had just finished explaining a classic example. She wrote down another high-level math question with the same idea and asked, "Can anyone tell me how to solve this problem?" Little Sheldon, who was sitting straight in the front row, was waiting for this moment. With a confident glow on his face, he raised his little hand instantly. With Sheldon's IQ of 187, the current high school knowledge is not difficult at all. He regards answering questions in class and finding the teacher's mistakes as a pleasure. When Ms. Ingram was about to call Sheldon, the only one who raised his hand, to answer the question, on the side, another big hand slowly raised up. Wow, it seems that our new classmate is not only handsome, but also smart. Ms. Ingram shifted her gaze to Mike, made a joke, and continued, "Then Mike, tell me how to solve this problem." Intelligence attribute +2, picked up a light ball of attribute from the exasperated little Sheldon. Mike's mouth corners slightly raised, and then he stood up and used two different problem-solving ideas to solve the exercises on the blackboard. Very good, Mike's answer is completely correct, and he also provided us with a brand new problem-solving idea. Ms. Ingram praised Mike generously. On the other side, little Sheldon looked at Mike, who sat down again after solving the problem and felt a sense of loss, as if his beloved toy was taken away by someone. In order to regain his toy, little Sheldon looked at the function problem on the blackboard again, and various formulas and analytical combinations in his mind were constantly decomposed, combined, and evolved. Finally, with a flash of inspiration, he really found another way to solve the problem. With a proud face, little Sheldon raised his hand again. "Sheldon, do you have anything else to say?" Ms. Ingram asked. "Yes, ma'am." Little Sheldon stood up with his head held high and said, "I thought of another way to solve the function problem." "Really, Sheldon, you're great." Ms. Ingram first habitually praised Sheldon in a coaxing tone, and then said, "However, in this class, students only need to learn the most basic problem-solving methods in the book." Seeing that Sheldon seemed a little disappointed, Ms. Ingram comforted him. "Sheldon, if you are interested in finding new ideas for solving problems, you can communicate with Mike after class." Ms. Ingram thought she was kind, but she didn't know that after she finished her comforting words, a small ball of light fell from little Sheldon. Intelligence attribute +1. I have to say that little Sheldon is really a qualified leek who has learned to produce wool by himself. Mike was very happy and accepted the light ball again. Next, little Sheldon seemed to fall into a vicious cycle. Whenever the math teacher asked a question again, he was always the first to raise his hand, but every time it was Mike who answered the question. This was not surprising. Mike was a new classmate, so handsome and so motivated to learn. Ms. Ingram naturally gave the new students more opportunities to perform. In the 16-9 book and bar, there is no wrong version. Here, Ms. Ingram can guarantee that she never deliberately ignored little Sheldon because he had found fault many times. However, little Sheldon didn't think so. He thought that this was Ingram's partiality and dictatorship, even though he raised his hand first. Finally, when the bell rang, little Sheldon had not grabbed the right to answer the questions throughout the class, and a large light ball burst out of his body. Looking at Ingram's back as he left, he angrily chased after him. Under the insistence of little Sheldon, Ms. Ingram could only agree to an agreement. In the future, in math class, a system of answering questions by rushing to answer will be implemented. On the other side, Mike hooked his finger and grabbed the large light ball. Intelligence attribute +5. Mike happily took the attribute and was thinking about where to go for a good meal at noon to reward himself. When he looked up, he saw that little Sheldon had come back again at some point and was staring at him expressionlessly. "What's the matter, Sheldon?" Mike asked. "I'm here to inform you that in math class in the future, you can't think of snatching any chance to answer questions from me," little Sheldon said seriously. "Is that so?" Mike smiled, deliberately patted the other person's shoulder, and said, "Then do your best." However, this time, little Sheldon did not contribute attributes to Mike again. Looking at the other person's back as he left, Mike shook his head and walked out of the classroom. Unexpectedly, when Mike reached the door, several girls from his class, who had been keeping an eye on him, quickly followed him. Birds of a feather flock together. Wealth, status, personality, and even appearance can divide people into different camps, and these camps will form small groups. Here, the campus life of middle school students can be said to be a small microcosm of society. Chapter 7 Bad Girl. The girls who approached Mike all had their own strengths. Either they were good at studying, or they were from wealthy families, or they were very confident in their looks and figures. Mike, I don't know how to answer a question. Can I ask you for help? This was a girl wearing glasses and holding a test paper. Mike, my house is quite big. Do you want to go take a look? This was a girl with blonde hair and wearing designer clothes. Mike, my cat can do somersaults. This was a girl with a hot body and a sweet look. Mike dealt with them casually, neither making any of them feel left out, nor actually making any promises to their requests. The main principle was 3 no's: no initiative, no rejection, no responsibility. As they walked and chatted, Mike, accompanied by several girls, came to the school cafeteria. At a glance, it was full of students eating in a mess. At this time, Lina, who had the best figure and appearance among the girls, gave Mike some knowledge. Don't think it's messy here. In fact, everyone's dining position is very particular. Cafeteria rules: people of different status should sit in different seats. For example, now, the 3 young, beautiful, and confident blonde girls sitting in the middle of the cafeteria, who seem to have their own halos, are the celebrities of Melford High School. They are Regina George, Karen Smith, and Gretchen Winans. It can be said that the dressing and work styles of these 3 people affect the fashion and trend of the entire school. With such a strong influence, these 3 people naturally have a lot of say in the school. Often, a few casual comments from them can determine the reputation of a person in the school. So these 3 blonde girls are beautiful, but they are also roses with thorns. Lina deliberately avoided the 3 people, pointed to an empty table in the middle, and explained to Mike, "That's where we eat." It can be heard that there is a little slight pride in her tone. Being able to have a table with a good position in the cafeteria also shows how popular Lina and others are in the school. Just when Lina and others were about to lead Mike to the window to get food, Regina, who was chatting with her companions in the hall, turned her head and happened to see the handsome Mike. There was a moment of surprise in her eyes, and then a sweet smile naturally appeared on her face. After hooking Mike with her eyes, Regina leaned over to the side and whispered a few words to Karen, who didn't look so smart. After a while, Big Wave Karen stood up and walked towards Mike tremblingly. Along the way, the students who were getting food all consciously made way for her. Karen smiled and walked in front of Mike, looked at his face for a few times, and then said with an innocent and shy look, "I'm Karen from the 12th grade. Why haven't I seen you in school before?" This Karen Smith has an amazing amount of breasts, but she is born with a perfect baby face. Under such a strong contrast, Karen also exudes a unique charm. Law of universal gravitation: the greater the mass, the stronger the gravity. As a physics enthusiast, Mike first verified the law of universal gravitation on Karen before saying, "My name is Mike, a new transfer student in the 11th grade." So it turns out that the Mike who attracted the attention of the girls in the whole building this morning is you. Karen looked as if she had suddenly realized something, and naturally there was a little admiration in her eyes. After satisfying Mike's vanity, Karen continued, "Regina is very interested in you and invites you to have dinner at our table later." "Really?" Mike looked up and saw Regina and Gretchen next to her in the middle of the cafeteria, both smiling at this sight. The charm of these 2 people is no less than Karen. With such a beautiful woman's invitation, Mike had no reason to refuse. He retracted his gaze and said to Karen, "Go back and tell your companions that I will be there in a while." After getting the answer, Karen smiled and gave Mike a playful wink, then turned around and walked back. Looking at the other person's elegant and evil back, Mike smacked his lips and sighed in his heart. The food in this school is really nutritious. As Karen left, the girls in Mike's class who had just had no sense of existence all breathed a sigh of relief. Then, these girls in the class seemed to be afraid of being associated with Regina and the other 2. They didn't even bother to eat lunch. They found some lame excuses and left the cafeteria in a hurry. After parting with Mike, Mike seemed to have sensed something and turned his head to see that Regina in the middle of the crowd had a smug smile on her face. Maybe this is the expression that hunters should have when they find precious prey in the jungle. "This is treating me as a prey." Mike instantly analyzed his current situation. However, Mike has seen difficult seniors like Jennifer, so he will naturally not be scared by 3 beautiful seniors like Regina. After returning Regina's bright smile, he walked towards the cafeteria window with a relaxed pace. A perfect version of the book in 1619. The cafeteria of the public middle school has a food subsidy quota, so the meals are very cheap. After Mike obtained the demon body, his physical fitness has improved significantly. In order to adapt to these skyrocketing physical fitness, he has been eating a lot recently. A giant beef burger, a seafood risotto, a meat and vegetable dish, an apple, a box of skim milk, and half a fried chicken. Mike's plate was filled to the brim. Under the strange gazes of many people, Mike carried the food and walked towards Regina and the other two. Just as he approached the middle position, Regina and the other two suddenly stood up with their leftover plates. On their plates, there were mostly dishes such as skim vegetables and energy meal replacements. Regina had a charming smile on her face, and then walked past Mike without looking away, as proud as a peacock. Gretchen was next. She also chased Regina away, as if she didn't see Mike. Only Karen, with a blank expression, stopped when she passed by Mike. Her baby face was a little embarrassed, and she whispered, "Regina asked me to tell you that, because you were too slow to pick up the food, the previous invitation has expired." The slow speed of picking up the food was probably all excuses. It didn't take long for Mike to get the food after being invited. Maybe Regina just felt that Mike was not attentive enough after receiving the invitation, which made him embarrassed. Most people would be very angry if they were treated like this, and they might even feel self-blame and annoyance. But Mike had been mentally prepared for a long time, and at this moment he was calm like a bystander. He smiled calmly and said, "Karen, thank you for your reminder." Karen was surprised to see that Mike was not as angry as expected, and said cutely, "Mike, you are a little different from other boys." As she said that, Karen turned her head to confirm that Regina had already walked away. She lowered her voice and said, "If you don't mind, you can eat at my table." Regina's previous behavior clearly showed that she wanted to embarrass Mike. Karen's private show of goodwill was also a great pressure. Without waiting for Mike to express his opinion, she left with a wink and followed Regina's steps and left. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Lunch. Regina and the other two were all celebrities on campus, and their every move attracted much attention. The fact that Mike was stood up by the three of them was naturally seen by the students around them. At this moment, most of them looked like they were watching a good show, staring at Mike who was standing there at a loss. Obviously, because of Regina's prank, Mike was isolated by the others. Of course, there were also some girls in the crowd who showed sympathetic eyes to Mike. Mike was very stable, and he didn't feel embarrassed when facing all kinds of strange looks from everyone. He looked around the cafeteria and unexpectedly found little George eating alone in the corner. So, Mike walked over with the food and sat opposite him. Little George seemed not to notice Mike's sudden arrival and just lowered his head and continued to eat. Only after most people in the cafeteria had shifted their attention away from Mike did George raise his head and glance at Mike, then said warily, "Mike, you're in big trouble. Regina's nickname at school is Queen Bee. Queen Bee controls the life and death of the hive and never lacks followers." Next, George whispered to Mike about Regina's glorious history. She had appeared on the cover of a small town fashion magazine. She lived in an independent villa. Her family was very rich. She was the leader of the school's devil body group, etc. George talked a lot, but when he looked up, he saw Mike gnawing on a fried chicken leg, looking nonchalant. This won't do. Seeing that Mike hadn't realized the seriousness of the problem, George looked at a table in the middle and gestured. "Look over there." Mike turned his head and saw a tall, sunny looking boy at a glance. See? He's Aaron Samuels, a 12th grader. He's also the quarterback and captain of the school's football team. At this point, George lowered his voice and gossiped mysteriously. "In addition to these, I heard that Aaron is Regina's ex-boyfriend." So, if you don't want to get into trouble, it's best to stay away from Regina. American football is popular, and Aaron Samuels, as the main player of the football team, is naturally a star-like figure in the school. Mike just came to school. If he offended Aaron, he would probably not be able to join the football team or study at ease in school. Take your time to eat. I'm leaving first. George had reminded everyone he should have. He didn't want to attract attention, so he decisively left the table with an empty plate. Watching George leave, Mike ate fried chicken while thinking. His IQ is now over 150, and high school studies are not difficult for him at all. Thinking of George's advice, Mike focused on football. He realized that maybe it would be appropriate to take football as his hobby. Thinking of this, Mike turned his head to look at the football captain Aaron. The other party also looked up at this time, and their eyes met in the air. There was no spark, nor was there any tension. Both nodded in a friendly manner, and then retracted their gazes. Just when Mike thought that Alan was a good person, a girl holding a plate suddenly bumped into the table where he was sitting. The collision was not light, and there was a lot of noise. Mike held the plate, that slid sideways on the table, and inevitably a few drops of oil stains on his cuffs. He looked up with dissatisfaction, and found that the girl opposite was a hot and beautiful blonde girl. I'm sorry. The girl apologized, while hurriedly picking up her scattered lunch. Forget it. Be careful next time. Mike saw that the other party's panic was not fake, and after taking out a napkin to wipe off the stain on his cuffs, he generously forgave the other party. The girl cleaned up the plate and noticed that Mike's casual suit might not be cheap, so she apologized. I'm so sorry. Why don't you give me the suit and I'll go back and wash it and return it to you? Thank you for your kindness, but no thanks. Mike declined the offer. The girl seemed touched to see that Mike was easy to talk to. She said, "My name is Katie Harlan. If you need compensation later, you can find me in the 12th grade. Katie Harlan is 16 years old. She grew up in Africa with her zoologist parents. She is a transfer student in the 12th grade this year. Because of the environment, Katie, who has been educated at home, is not used to the education methods of public schools. She doesn't know that she can't eat anything in class, and she doesn't know that she needs to ask the teacher for permission to go to the bathroom during class. The different concepts make Katie look weird, and her rustic clothes make her even more excluded by her classmates. In the past 2 weeks, this beautiful girl has not even made a friend in school." After taking another look at Mike, who was eating with his head down, Katie took her plate and walked out of the cafeteria. Unlike the calm and open-minded Mike, Katie, who is delicate and sensitive, can't find a seat in the cafeteria. As a marginal person like her, she can only find a place outside where no one is to eat her lunch. Just as she passed by Mike, Katie felt a sharp pain in her knee, tripped, and fell towards Mike with a scream. Mike stood up quickly, holding the girl who hit him with one hand and catching her plate with the other. At this time, a red apple fell from the plate with a gurgle, a correct version of the book in 1619. Fortunately, Mike was quick-witted and put the apple back on the plate with a hook of his right toe. Looking down, the girl in his hand was staring at him with admiration. Mike, what kind of youth campus idol love is this? If he didn't know Katie's true situation, Mike would really think that the girl was coveting his beauty and deliberately swindled him. He put down the plate and helped the girl to sit down. Mike hooked his fingers and picked up 2 small balls of light from the air. Logical thinking attribute +1. Skin quality attribute +1. What kind of strange attributes are these? It was the first time Mike picked up such attributes. After he merged these 2 attributes, he found that logical thinking went to the intelligence attribute, and skin quality was integrated into the physical attribute. However, the integration of these 2 strange attributes did not increase Mike's 2 basic attributes. Without thinking anymore, Mike looked at the girl in front of him and asked, "Do you need me to take you to the infirmary?" Katie was checking her knee at this time. She grew up in the wilds of Africa and had a lot of experience with various bruises and abrasions. After moving her knee again, Katie found that her knee had no other problems except for some redness and swelling and a small abrasion. After taking out a portable band-aid and sticking it on the wound, Katie smiled and said, "No, I'm fine now." "Well, Thank you for your previous help. Katie thought about it, but couldn't find an appropriate adjective. Chapter 9, Making Friends. After the knee was treated, Katie expressed her gratitude and prepared to leave with a plate. She was not used to campus life, and now she was sensitive and humble. Mike shook his head, pushed his plate to the other side, and said, "Katie, if you want, you can eat here." "Really? That's great." Katie responded loudly in surprise, looking excited. You know, in the animal world, being willing to share territory is a manifestation of acceptance and friendliness. But soon Katie realized that this was not the African jungle, and her previous reaction was too exaggerated. In order not to scare the boy next to her, Katie calmed down and explained in a calm tone, "I mean, you are such a good person." In the girl's cognition, praising the other person is also a manifestation of goodwill. But in Mike's cognition, being identified as a good person by a beautiful girl is not a good thing. However, due to the differences in cultures, Mike can also understand what the other person means. "Thank you for your compliment. You are also a good person," Mike said seriously, smiled, and sat across from the girl to continue enjoying lunch. In the girl's puzzled look, this trick is called defeating magic with magic. On the other side, although Katie didn't know why Mike praised her as a good person, she had already felt the other party's friendly attitude. This was the first time for the girl to have someone accompany her to enjoy lunch at school, and this experience made her feel wonderful. In the warm atmosphere, Katie felt that she should say something more. She looked up at the handsome boy across from her and saw the rich food piled in front of the boy and praised him again. "You have a big appetite, you know. In the animal world, only the strongest animals can have rich food and a better appetite." In the girl's mind, praising someone for having a big appetite is a high compliment. However, in civilized society, big eater usually makes people think of glutton. Mike stopped his knife and fork, looked up at the girl across from him, and saw that she looked sincere. The girl didn't seem to know that a sincere compliment would cause trouble to others. "I'm growing up recently," Mike explained indifferently, and then gave the girl a look, and then continued to eat. His subtext, "Well said, don't say it next time." But Mike overestimated the girl. Katie now doesn't have the ability to read other people's eyes. Sure enough, Katie saw that what she said was responded to again. Her desire to communicate was also aroused. She secretly glanced at Mike's handsome face and continued to talk. "Which class are you in? Why haven't I seen you in school before?" Mike didn't even raise his head this time. While picking at the seafood risotto, he casually said, "I'm an 11th grade transfer student. I just reported today. It's normal that you haven't seen me before." Mike ate a serving of seafood risotto with relish. It's true that, although the school cafeteria is a big pot, the ingredients and portions are sufficient, and the taste control is also good. At least this seafood risotto is very much to Mike's taste. On the other hand, Katie, who was in the middle of talking, didn't realize that Mike was perfunctory. Hearing that Mike was also a transfer student, she was secretly delighted at first, and then shared her experience with deep sympathy. The days of transfer students are very hard, and the change of environment makes people uneasy. There are also new teachers and new classmates, and it takes time to slowly adapt. The girl, who had a strong desire to talk, almost revealed all her mental journey as a transfer student in the past 2 weeks. At this time, Mike, who was opposite, had already started to enjoy his giant beef burger. The burger tasted pretty good, especially the meat patty in the middle, which was thick and tender. Over there, Katie didn't need Mike to answer. She changed the topic and talked about the place where she used to live. "Do you know that Africa is the area with the most wild animals on the earth? There you can see elephants, rhinos, lions, hippos, giraffes." Seeing the girl's excited look when she talked about Africa, Mike nodded and agreed while biting an apple. After introducing the animals, Katie talked about the local tribal culture in Africa. At the end, the girl was a little proud and showed off and said, "My family has a collection of Zulu and Maasai handicrafts. They are souvenirs given to my mother by the locals. If you are interested in them, I can take you to my house to have a look." After a talk and communication, Katie regained the youthful vitality that a 16-year-old girl should have. The awkwardness she had felt before was also mostly gone. Mike had also finished his lunch at this time. After he cleaned up his plate, he said, "It's very interesting. I will definitely go to see them next time I have a chance." After that, Mike picked up the empty plate and was about to leave. Wait, Katie saw that the other party was about to leave and subconsciously picked up the plate and followed him. However, she was only busy chatting before, and the food in front of her was hardly touched. Growing up in Africa, she developed the habit of not wasting food. A perfect version of the book in 1619. So between leaving and not leaving, Katie finally chose to stay and finish the food. Facing Mike's gaze, Katie's eyes were a little vague at first, and then she smiled brightly and said, "We have been talking for so long, and I still don't know your name." "My name is Mike Quinn, and I'm very happy to talk to you." Mike was polite and prepared to leave. Looking at Mike's back, Katie suddenly felt reluctant to leave, and she called out again, "Mike, Mike," who had just taken a few steps, rolled his eyes. "Are you acting an idle drama here for me?" This time Mike was determined not to leave. He walked back calmly, put the plate on the table, looked at the girl, and said, "Go ahead, what else?" Katie didn't notice Mike's impatience. She said shyly, "Well, we already know each other's names. So are we friends?" Of course Mike nodded and asked again, "Anything else?" After getting Mike's affirmative answer, Katie, who had her first friend at school, was now very happy. She covered her cheeks, which were a little red because of excitement, and said, "No more, Mike. See you next time." At this time, Mike unexpectedly saw that several balls of light suddenly popped out of Katie's body. Memory ability attribute +3, logical thinking attribute +3, skin attribute +1. She had been talking for so long before, but no ball of light was produced. As a result, just because he agreed to be friends with her, she generously contributed a ball of light. Mike, this girl is worth making friends with. After attracting the ball of light in his hand, Mike smiled and said, "Okay, see you next time." At the same time, according to the guidance of Carnegie's book How to Win Friends and Influence Others, Sheldon, who failed to make friends, went to the library to return a book. Coincidentally, here, he met Dan, a Vietnamese classmate who also had no friends. Both of them liked to explore the universe and rockets, so they hit it off and became each other's first friend at the same time. Then, the two of them enjoyed their lunch together in the library. Chapter 10: Joining the football team. The afternoon schedule of the public high school was very relaxed. 1 hour of self-study class and 2 hours of physical exercise. Because the class teacher, Ms. Victoria, was not in the office, the 1 hour self-study class almost became a free activity class. Most of the students gathered in groups of 3 or 4, chatting and talking to kill time. Mike still sat in the first row. No one disturbed him. He borrowed a science book from little Sheldon and started reading. There were already multiple versions of what happened between Mike and Regina at noon, and it spread among the girls in the class. Fearing the power of Regina, Queen Bee, no one in the class came to disturb Mike during the entire self-study class. Learning makes people happy, and an hour passed quickly. Mike returned the book to little Sheldon and asked curiously, "Sheldon, what sports do you participate in?" In the United States, good health is also an advantage. Even those well-known universities will reserve about 10% of the quota every year to recruit students with sports specialties. Over there, little Sheldon put away his books and looked up and said, "My friend Dan and I have agreed that we will report to the basketball team. For those who are not good at sports and want to get enough sports credits, it is a good choice to sign up for a group project to slack off." But Mike knows that there is a mental sport that is also counted as a sports project. He asked, "Why don't you consider playing chess?" Little Sheldon thought about it for a while, and then said pleasantly, "It's a good suggestion. I'll find Dan to take a look." After that, he hurried out of the classroom. On the other side, Mike also found little George, who was going to the rugby field. Joining the rugby team is simple. You need to have your own set of sports equipment. After knowing Mike's intention, little George said, "If you really decide to join the team, I can accompany you to buy equipment after school. Rugby is very competitive, and even in training, you need to wear protective gear." Soon the two came to the rugby field. At this time, there were already many well-dressed students on the field, warming up. Mike also saw Regina and others in the open space on the other side of the football field. They were wearing the same cheerleading skirts and were full of youthful vitality. Cheerleading dance, as a collective activity, was also included in the sports program. At this time, Regina was surrounded by other girls in the cheerleading team and was busy sharing gossip with them and did not notice Mike. Karen on the side saw Mike wearing different clothes. She waved to Mike secretly while Regina was not paying attention. This girl has a hot body and wearing a cheerleading uniform is even more charming. On the other side, football coach George was very happy to see Mike coming. Because Melford Middle School is a public school, the physical fitness of students is generally lower than those of private middle schools. And football happens to be a sport that values physical talent. Often, physical fitness is not as good as the opponent, which means that the results are not as good as the opponent. Therefore, if someone with physical talent like Mike is willing to join the team, he will definitely improve the team's performance. After Mike stated his purpose, George enthusiastically took him to do a physical test. The content of the physical test is nothing more than starting from the 6 aspects of balance, flexibility, speed, strength, endurance, and agility. Among them, speed and strength are the most important. Faster running speed allows players to complete better offense and defense on the court, and stronger strength can give players an advantage in physical confrontation. Speed test. 40 yards, 36.5 meters, sprint. Mike took off his coat, stretched his body, and stood on the starting line. With an order, he rushed out like a cheetah. George looked at the 4.9s result on the stopwatch and almost cheered excitedly. It is already very good for high school students to run for 5 seconds, not to mention that Mike broke the 5-second mark at one time. Now, George is more convinced that Mike is very talented in rugby. Let's test 2 more groups, George said to Mike, who came back. Then, Mike tested twice more and refreshed his best result to 4.5s. This result is already amazing. Even if Mike is now wearing protective gear weighing about 20 pounds, 9 kilograms, he can probably run within 5 seconds. George, who was calling out good luck, left the assistant coach to watch the players in daily training and took Mike to the equipment room for strength testing. Strength test, bench press, 125% of body weight, times. This item requires weight measurement first. Mike measured it on the ruler. He was 182 centimeters tall and weighed 169 pounds, 76.66 kilograms. A correct version was found in the 16:9 book forum. During this period, his height actually grew by 2 centimeters and his weight increased by 4 pounds. Then, Mike did a 211-pound bench press, and the final result reached 11 times. A 5-time bench press is considered excellent in the football team, and Mike's 11-time bench press is already very good. However, football has never lacked strength players, and their bench press scores can often reach more than 20 or 30 times. So overall, Mike will be a speed player, that is, a running back behind the quarterback. Next, Mike went to test other items. 1.05 meters high touch, 3.12 meters standing long jump. After more than an hour of testing, Coach George took Mike's data list and said excitedly, "Mike, believe me, you will become the ace of the team. You will even become a star player on the football field in the future." George used to be a football player, and now he seems to have placed his career dream on Mike. As he spoke, a large ball of light fell from him. Football experience plus 100. With this experience group, Mike's football level instantly reached the entry level. Then, Coach George took Mike back to the training ground. He clapped his hands, called all the players together, and introduced, "His name is Mike, and he has excellent physical conditions. He will be one of us in the future." Everyone welcomed. This was the first time that Coach George introduced a newcomer so solemnly, and all the players looked at Mike curiously. Finally, under the leadership of Captain Aaron and George, everyone in the team clapped their hands. Mike, a newcomer who looks like he has good physical fitness, can actually easily get the recognition of the players. Of course, not everyone welcomes Mike. In the crowd, a fat guy who is about 1.8 meters tall is very upset when he sees that Coach George attaches so much importance to Mike. This guy is called Sam. He is the strongest person in the team besides the captain Aaron, and he is also the current running back of the team. Mike's appearance makes him vaguely feel that his position is threatened. Over there, after introducing Mike, Coach George saw that the time was almost up, and after encouraging the players a few more words, he announced the dismissal. Chapter 11 Sports Protective Gear. Knowing that Mike was going to buy protective gear, George first dropped off little Sheldon, who was always nagging and talking about the friends he had made along the way, at the door of his house. Then he drove Mike and little George to a professional sporting goods store in town. Dale, the owner of this sporting goods store, is half a colleague of George. He is a baseball coach at a public elementary school in town. Soon, under the guidance of George, Mike entered the store. The store doesn't look big, but it has a complete range of sporting goods. It can be seen that the owner is an expert. The owner, Dale, is an old man in his 70s, tall and thin, with a little baldness on his head and most of his hair is white, but he looks very energetic. Seeing George leading people in, Dale greeted with a smile. "George, are you bringing your team members to see the protective gear again?" "Yes, Mike just joined the team, and he needs a complete set of sports equipment." George pulled Mike to his side and introduced him, and then said to the boss familiarly, "Dale, Mike is one of us. You have to give him a better discount this time." Dale looked at Mike and said cheerfully, "No problem. This kid is a good football player at first glance." Mike, who was almost 16 years old, had a somewhat immature face, but a tall and straight figure, and was the type of tough guy that Texans admired. "Little George, take Mike to see the protective gear. I'll chat with Dale here for a while." George waved his hand and then sat on the chair in front of the counter. Dale was a cheerful old man. Seeing George sitting down, he also took out 2 bottles of beer from under the counter. The two drank beer while chatting about their own interesting stories. Little George took Mike to the football equipment area. He looked at the rows of sports equipment and introduced, "You are still a novice, so it is best to buy a set of basic protective gear." Basic, it means cheap and cost effective. The competition and confrontation in rugby are very fierce, and newcomers often have a 3-minute enthusiasm. The basic protective gear is not expensive, so even if it is not used in the future, it will not make people feel that they are losing money. In a way, George is a man who knows how to live, but Mike knows his situation. With the blessing of the devil body, he is not afraid of confrontation or injury. So, after looking at a few basic protective gears, he shook his head and said, "George, I need some better quality equipment." When he spoke, his expression was calm, and he exuded a temperament of not lacking money. This is also the case. Although Mike is an orphan, he has a living expense of 500 million yuan every month. Before, he was not good at socializing, and had no place to spend money, so all the money was saved. Conservatively estimated, Mike should have about 10,000 million yuan in his bank card now. The US dollar has not depreciated yet. An excellent football coach like George only earns $500 a week. 10,000 US dollars is equivalent to George's salary for half a year without food or drink. So relatively speaking, Mike is now a small rich man. Over there, although George himself does not buy those high-end protective gear, this does not prevent him from understanding those high-end products. After hearing Mike's request, he took Mike to the protective gear with better quality and became a qualified interpreter. Finally, in the envious eyes of George, Mike chose a set of high-quality sports protective gear. Of course, the prices marked on these protective gear are not low. Avenger helmet 800, shoulder armor 650, gloves 100, sports shoes 450, pad pants 200, waist guard 150, knee pads and wrist guards 260. On the way to the counter, Mike also picked a copper whistle worth $80 from the shelf next to him. When Mike and George came to the counter, George, who was drinking with the boss, saw at a glance that the protective gear Mike picked were all high quality goods. He clinked his bottle with Dell and said, "Last time I brought my team to buy protective gear, you gave me a 15% discount. This time, you should give Mike a 25% discount." Hearing the discount George wanted, Dell was so surprised that he didn't even drink his beer. He looked at the protective gear that Mike and George brought and said in a dilemma, For your sake, I will give this kid a 20% discount this time, but only this time. Deal. George smiled and clinked his bottle with Del again. George, who works in sports, can see that the goods in Del's store are of high quality and the prices are not inflated. If he can give a 20% discount, he is probably close to the other party's bottom line. The protective gear was placed on the counter one by one, and Del took out a pen and paper and a small calculator, and began to calculate the price. It must be said that this elderly boss has no talent in arithmetic. Mike can calculate the answer in 1 second, but this boss has to check it back and forth on paper several times. However, Mike, who knew the answer, did not disturb the boss's interest. Finally, after a long while, Del put down the paper and pen and said, "The items here are worth 2,690 yuan. If you give me a 20% discount." At this point, Del picked up the calculation paper on the counter, took a look at it, and then continued, "After the discount, the total is 2,152 yuan. A correct version of the book on 1619. Hearing the total price of more than 2,000 yuan, George and his son were both shocked. You know, the equipment that George is using for training now is less than 500 yuan, and 2,000 yuan is George's salary for a month of hard work. George stopped drinking beer, pulled Mike in front of him, and whispered, "Are you sure you want to buy such expensive protective gear?" Mike said, "I think I can make good use of them. As the saying goes, if you want to do your work well, you must first sharpen your tools." Mike, who has decided to join the football team, doesn't think it would be a waste of money to buy a good set of sports protective gear. Seeing Mike's insistence, George didn't say anything more. He finally asked with concern, "Do you have enough money on you?" Mike nodded and took out his bank card from his pocket. George then turned his head and looked at Dale and said, "These protective gears are too expensive. Let's round off the difference. How about 2,000 yuan? No way." Dale reacted violently and shook his head and said, "George, you know, I can't make any money from this business." When the discount was given, Dale didn't feel anything. But if he directly deducted more than 150 yuan, Dale could calculate the account. A bottle of beer is 70 cents. 150 yuan. This can buy a lot of beer. Dale, don't think I don't know. Even if it's 2,000 yuan, you can still make money. George first analyzed it in an affirmative tone, and then said in a negotiating tone, "How about this? Let's take a step back. How about 2,100 yuan? Hearing George's words, Dale hesitated and calculated in his mind, how much beer can 50 yuan buy? Finally, under friendly negotiation, Mike swiped the card for 2,100 yuan and reached this deal. When leaving, Dale shouted to George, "After you retire, you will be a good boss." George smiled and waved his hand, indicating Dale to meet for a drink next time. Then, he took Mike and George out of the sporting goods store. Chapter 12. Little Sheldon's Jealousy. After arriving at the car and putting away the things, Mike took out from the package a pair of sports wrist guards and the copper whistle that were specially packed by Mr. Dell. Mike handed them to George and his son respectively and said, "Thank you for accompanying me to buy protective gear. Please accept these small gifts." George and his son were very happy to receive such thoughtful gifts. Then, Mike signaled to George that he wanted to bring some small gifts to little Sheldon and Grandma Connie. So George drove the car and took Mike around the street again. At the same time, little Sheldon, who returned home alone, met Mary's mother and Grandma Connie. He excitedly stepped forward and told the two about the friends he made today. Mary was worried that Sheldon would be bullied and isolated because he couldn't make friends when he went to high school at such a young age. Now, hearing that little Sheldon had friends at school, she was naturally happy for her youngest son. Grandma Connie also went up to hug little Sheldon to show encouragement. Missy heard the noise and came out of the bedroom. After learning about Sheldon, she said disdainfully, "Anyone who can be friends with Sheldon is probably a weirdo." Mary, who had just breathed a sigh of relief for her son's friend, was worried again when she heard her daughter say that. Knowing her son's character, she hesitated for a while and suggested, "Shelley, invite your friend to your home for dinner." Sheldon was simple-minded and unsympathetic, and asked in confusion, "Why?" Mary smiled and explained, "As friends, it is normal to have a meal at each other's home." This is also a friendly expression between friends. In fact, Mary was worried that some people with ulterior motives would deliberately approach Sheldon, the genius, under the pretext of making friends. Inviting the other party to her home was also to help Sheldon check and prevent him from being hurt. After hearing Mary's explanation, Sheldon believed it without thinking too much. Still in an excited state, he immediately called Dan to invite him. After a while, Sheldon came back happily and informed everyone that Dan had accepted his dinner invitation. Seeing that her plan had succeeded, Mary happily went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. As an experienced person, Grandma Connie saw through Mary's little thoughts at once. She followed to the kitchen and reminded her, "Mary, it's not good for you to do this. It may hurt Sheldon and his friends." Mary's little thoughts were exposed, but she still said stubbornly, "I'm doing this for Sheldon's good. Okay, I hope you won't scare Sheldon's friends later." Connie shook her head and left the kitchen in a chic manner. When George and his friends came back, they saw a table full of sumptuous meals. Several people in the room were also dressed in decent clothes and looked very formal. George was surprised and said, "Is it an important day today?" Seeing George's surprised look, Mary explained, "Sheldon's friends will come to visit our home later." She did not tell her husband about her worries, but just shared with him the joy of Sheldon making friends. On the other side, Mike saw that everyone was here, and he also found an opportunity to distribute the gifts he brought to several people. Grandma Connie's was a fashionable sun hat, Mary's was a soft silk scarf, Sheldon's was a toy train, and Mrs. was a pink Barbie doll. Except for Sheldon, who was busy playing with the train, the others who received the gifts immediately expressed their gratitude to Mike. Missy took the opportunity to throw herself into Mike's arms again. The little girl also found the big bag in Mike's hand, and she asked curiously, "Mike, what is this?" Grandma Connie and Mary also looked over. Obviously, although Mike had only been here for a day, Sheldon's family had already regarded him as a family member. So, under the curious eyes of several people, Mike told them about his joining the football team. "Cool," Missy exclaimed, and then pestered Mike to let him put on the protective gear for everyone to see. In fact, it was the little girl who wanted to see it. Mike was still delaying, but Grandma Connie on the side said mischievously, "Mike, try it on. Grandma also wants to see." Seeing that he was free, Mike nodded. Then he carried the protective gear and followed George to his room. With the help of George, Mike quickly put on all his football equipment. Mike, wearing the protective gear, felt like a general ready to go. The protective gear was his armor. After he went out with the helmet, he attracted cheers from the ladies in the room. Grandma Connie smiled and said, "Mike, you look like this. I don't know how many high school girls will be fascinated by you." Missy went straight to touch the protective gear on Mike. Seeing Mary's admiring expression, George said jealously, "I was so handsome back then, a perfect version in 1619 book bar." Mary turned her head and looked at her husband's fat body and huge beer belly, and tsk twice. Although she didn't say a word, it was extremely insulting. George touched his beer belly awkwardly and didn't dare to brag anymore. In the room, except Sheldon, who was still playing with the train, everyone else praised Mike. Then, Mike, who was too hot, went back to George's room alone and took off his gear. When he came out again, Sheldon's friend Dan had already arrived. He sat at the dining table, looking at little Sheldon's family, looking a little at a loss. Little Sheldon, who was supposed to introduce Dan to his family, didn't notice that the atmosphere was a little frozen. Everyone at the table stared at each other. The atmosphere improved only after Mike sat at the dining table. After the prayer, in order to liven up the atmosphere, Grandma Connie talked about the interesting things that happened. When Mike entered school, all the girls in the building were attracted to Mike, and Mike got full marks in the entrance exam. In Grandma Connie's words, Mike is a heartthrob who studies well and has a smart head. George drank a sip of beer and joined the chat. He mainly talked about Mike's talent in rugby. In his mouth, Mike has strong athletic talent and is the future savior of the team. As the topic deepened, except for little Sheldon and Mary, everyone else at the table focused their attention on Mike. Dan looked at Mike with envy and whispered to little Sheldon beside him, "I wish I was as good as him and popular with girls." Although little Sheldon was reluctant to admit it, after a day of personal experience, he felt that Mike was stealing his limelight everywhere. Now even his only friend Dan is on his side. Feeling the crisis, he was unconvinced and said, "I'm better than Mike, and the girls in school like me very much." "That's different." Dan organized his words and whispered, "You are popular with girls because your testosterone secretion is insufficient, and they think you are cute. Mike is popular with girls because he is very attractive to the opposite sex. Little Sheldon, is there any difference?" Looking at little Sheldon's innocent appearance, Dan felt it was difficult to explain to him the difference between women's liking for the opposite sex and liking for cute things. So, Dan answered decisively, "No." Chapter 13 Guests. At the dinner table, Mary had been secretly observing Dan, as if she wanted to study Sheldon's friend thoroughly. Seeing Dan whispering to Sheldon, the sensitive mother's face suddenly became serious. She pinched her husband who was drinking beer next to her and whispered, "George." Then, she motioned her husband to go and see Sheldon and his friend. George thought Mary was worried that Sheldon's friend was being ignored. So he said casually, "Dan, what country's name is this?" Dan looked up and saw George's kind face and explained, "This is a Vietnamese name, sir." It can be seen that he was still a little reserved. When George heard that Dan was from Vietnam, he became interested. When he was young, he served in the army and went to Vietnam to fight. He had his own views on that backward little country. However, as two different parties, they naturally felt differently about the war. George simply could not understand how much trauma that war brought to Dan and his family. Seeing this, George seemed to be unconscious and talked to Dan about the war that year. Grandma Connie, who was standing by, suddenly called out, "George." George stopped talking and turned around to ask, "What's wrong?" "I want to drink cold beer." "Go get me a bottle." Grandma Connie looked bossy. "Okay, you really know how to order people around." George was defeated by Grandma Connie's gaze and walked towards the refrigerator complaining. Mike quietly gave Grandma Connie a thumbs up. Others at the table might not understand Grandma Connie's intention, but Mike knew that, although Grandma Connie seemed to be bullying George, she was actually taking care of the feelings of the guest Dan. Mary, who was standing by, seemed even more worried after knowing that Dan was from Vietnam. While she was thinking about how to interrogate Dan, Mike, who was standing by, took the lead and said, "Dan, which class are you in? What are your hobbies?" Mike, who was handsome and excellent in all aspects, was a person Dan needed to look up to. Seeing Mike take the initiative to talk to him, Dan felt a little flattered. Seeing that the other party's tone was very friendly, Dan was so excited that he foolishly revealed all his information. Then, under Mike's deliberate guidance, Dan, a simple child, told the information about his family. Finally, in a friendly atmosphere, Dan took the initiative to talk about the hardships he suffered when he was a child. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened to you," Mike said after listening to Dan's story. "Thank you." Dan felt Mike's kindness, and after a talk, he seemed to feel better and more comfortable. Little Sheldon, who was standing aside, seemed to have suddenly improved his emotional intelligence and immediately expressed his concern for Dan. As little Sheldon's caring words came out, the feelings of these two equally simple friends seemed to deepen a little at this moment. When George came back with the ice beer, he found that the table was already a happy scene. "George, finally, I don't have to liven up the atmosphere anymore." After putting the ice beer in front of Grandma Connie, George, who was happy to be free, also drank beer comfortably. As for Mary, after fully understanding Dan's situation, she gradually accepted this friend of little Sheldon. At the same time, a conversation was also going on at Katie's dining table. Katie has been acting a little strange since she came back today. She rummaged through the closet that she never cared about and hummed a little song in her room. This active performance is completely different from her 2 weeks ago. At the dining table, Katie's mother carefully asked, "Katie, how was your day at school today?" "Not bad." Katie smiled. Katie's parents saw their daughter smiling, looked at each other tacitly, and Katie's mother continued to ask, "Did you encounter any good things at school?" "I have my first friend. His name is Mike. He is a very good person," Katie said, thinking of Mike's handsome face. Her little face couldn't help but get hot. The name Mike sounds like a boy, and seeing his daughter's shy appearance, Katie's father became alert. He pretended to be casual and asked, "What grade is Mike in? Does he have any bad habits at home, Dad?" Seeing that her father's questions were getting more and more outrageous, Katie immediately interrupted him and said dissatisfiedly, "We just met." In order not to arouse his daughter's rebellious psychology, Katie's father could only look at Katie's mother for help. Katie's mother understood and said to her daughter gently, "Katie, tell us how you met Mike, okay?" Katie also felt that the process of meeting Mike today was very dreamy, so she happily shared this moment with her mother. On the side, Katie's father couldn't stop smiling when his daughter mentioned the boy named Mike. The old father couldn't help but exude a sour smell. Before, his daughter couldn't make friends at school, which made him very distressed. Now his daughter has made friends and seems to be fascinated by them. This time, Katie's father is not only distressed, but also a little sad. While Katie was still praising Mike, he whispered to his wife, "Katie has never participated in group life. We need to screen her first friend. Maybe that guy named Mike is a bad guy." Seeing her husband's nervous look, Katie's mother persuaded him, "It's a good thing for my daughter to make friends at school. You're overreacting. A perfect version at 1619 book bar. Aren't you curious about what kind of person Mike is?" Katie's father asked back. Katie used to study at home, but now she was suddenly sent to school. In fact, Katie's mother was worried about her daughter's safety like other mothers who just sent their little daughters to kindergarten. Hearing her husband's question, Katie's mother wavered, "Maybe we should meet Mike to see if he is as good as my daughter said." "That's right." Katie's father concluded, "You can find an opportunity later and let my daughter invite Mike to our home. We can also see his character." It happened that Katie had just finished talking about how she met Mike. Katie's mother took this opportunity to say, "Katie, you can make friends. Your father and I are very happy for you. So, you can invite Mike to your home tomorrow. Your father and I can also treat your friends well for you." On the side, Katie's father saw that his wife completed the task so quickly, and after quietly giving a thumbs up, he echoed, "Yes, I will treat your friends well." Katie did not hear the ambiguity in her father's words. She thought about it and said, "Wouldn't it be too abrupt?" Just when Katie's parents were about to be disappointed, they heard Katie say, "Why not change it to the weekend? There is more time on the weekend." "Okay, that's it. It just so happens that your father and I are free on the weekend," Katie's mother said with a smile. In fact, Katie's parents are both zoologists and have their own independent studio. There is no such thing as clocking in at work. So, no matter when Katie invites Mike to her home, they can always make time. On the other side, the Cooper family's dinner had just ended. Mike, who was carrying his football protective gear and preparing to go back, met Sheldon and Ann at the door. The two were about to go to the garage to study rockets. Perhaps because Mike gave him a toy train, Sheldon unexpectedly invited him. "Mike, do you want to see my homemade rocket?" Well, judging from Sheldon's arrogant expression, he was showing off to Mike. "No, thank you." Mike declined, and then reminded him, "If your rocket is equipped with a power system, I advise you to go to an open place to launch." "Thank you for your reminder." Sheldon walked past Mike with Dan in an arrogant manner. I don't know if the other party listened to his advice. Mike shook his head and walked towards Grandma Connor's house. Chapter 14 Campus Storm. Sure enough, the arrogant little Sheldon did not listen to Mike's advice. The rocket he developed went out of control in the garage and smashed a window of the residential building. When Mike and Grandma Connie heard the noise and came out, they saw two FBLs in suits escorting little Sheldon and Dan out of the garage. George's family also appeared here, looking at little Sheldon with worry. Seeing that the two men in suits were not friendly, Grandma Connie hurried up to ask, "What happened?" As she said, Grandma Connie was about to protect little Sheldon behind her, but was stopped by a man in a suit. "Please step back, ma'am." The leading man in a suit separated Grandma Connie, and then looked seriously at the 9-year-old Sheldon. "Have you ever bought uranium from the Canada mine?" Although little Sheldon has a high IQ, he is still a child after all. At this time, he was stared at by the sharp eyes of the man in the suit, and he was so scared that he couldn't speak and could only look at his parents for help. George and Mary had never seen such a scene before. Facing the FBL's door-to-door investigation, they couldn't come up with an idea for a while. Mike quietly hooked the several light balls that burst out of little Sheldon into his hands. Intelligence attribute +1. Rocket development experience +66. After fusing the light balls, Mike said, "Sheldon, you don't have to be afraid, just answer their questions truthfully. With us here, you are safe." Hearing Mike's words, the two men in suits turned their heads and glared at him in warning, but in the end they didn't say anything. Little Sheldon, who received support, was also relieved of his fear and replied, I thought about buying uranium, but the person in charge of the mine didn't sell it to me because I didn't have enough procedures. If I had uranium as fuel, my rocket would definitely not get out of control." It has to be said that little Sheldon is a genius. In the absence of fuel drive, he used electricity instead and still made his rocket launch successfully. After hearing little Sheldon's explanation, the two men in suits were a little helpless about this smart child. First, little Sheldon was too young, and many methods of handling cases could not be used on him. Second, the child obviously didn't realize how dangerous his behavior was. However, the two FBL agents had searched the garage before and did not find any dangerous goods. The questioning at this time was more of a routine matter, and trying to buy uranium cannot be used as evidence of a crime. In the end, the leading agent still verbally warned little Sheldon on the charge of threatening public safety. Before leaving, the agent interviewed George and Mary, the two guardians of little Sheldon, separately, and repeatedly reminded them to keep an eye on their children. A rocket fast came to an end after George and his wife and Grandma Connie preached to little Sheldon. On Mike's side, in the class the next morning, he still rushed to answer questions with little Sheldon. However, after the blow in the classroom yesterday, little Sheldon seemed to be mentally prepared. This morning, he only contributed one intelligence attribute. This also made Mike realize that, if he wants to continue to fleece little Sheldon in the future, he may need to find a more suitable opportunity. In this way, picking up attributes will be a protracted battle. At noon, Mike met Katie again in the restaurant. Today, she wore a red slim-fitting shirt and tight jeans, which showed off her figure very well. Seeing the girl who was much more confident than yesterday, Mike sincerely praised her. Little George, who was standing by, saw such a beautiful girl coming over and couldn't help but chat with her. As a result, he found that the girl who was chatting and laughing with Mike was visibly cold when talking to him. Little George looked at Mike's handsome face and found the problem. He was hit and wisely chose to shut up, eating dog food while eating lunch. On the other side, Katie happily shared with Mike the interesting stories of her childhood. After a conversation, the girl never mentioned her school life. It seemed that she still hadn't adapted to school life. Mike noticed this carefully. In the next conversation, he deliberately led the topic to campus life. It can be regarded as helping the girl to integrate into the campus group faster. During a meal, the two of them got to know each other better. Finally, at the end of lunch, Katie finally plucked up the courage to invite Mike to her home. Mike was a little surprised by the girl's sudden invitation, but thinking that he had nothing to do on the weekend, Mike readily agreed. After the three of them parted, Mike went to the library alone to find some books about the rules of football. However, after searching around the library, Mike did not find the book he wanted. He found a correct version in the 16-9 book bar. So, in the afternoon self-study class, he went to the back row and asked George to explain the rules of football to him. George has a father who is a football coach, so he is naturally very familiar with this knowledge. Finally, he had the opportunity to be a teacher, so he patiently explained it to Mike. The sport of football seems simple and crude, but there are many rules in it. Almost every position has a corresponding sports manual. Fortunately, with the improvement of intelligence, Mike's memory is getting better and better. In an hour, he has memorized all the rules of football. After the self-study time, Mike put on protective gear and walked to the football field with George. It is August now, the hottest time of the year. Mike didn't feel it very much yesterday, but after putting on the thick protective gear again today, he felt that the protective gear was stuffy and hot after the novelty wore off. He was a little irritated. As soon as he came to the court, he was stopped by three girls. This time, it was Regina and her 3 friends. Because of their pretty faces and slim figures, the 3 girls of the devil figure group attracted many people's attention with every move. Regina raised her head slightly, without even looking at little George beside her. She stared at Mike and said, "Congratulations on joining the football team." As she said that, the girl had a fake smile on her face. If someone didn't know her, they would think she was very familiar with Mike. As the queen bee of the school, Regina usually waits for boys to cater to her. Mike has an outstanding appearance and has been included in her candidate list. Because of what happened yesterday, she should have kept Mike hanging for a while. However, at noon in the restaurant, she saw Mike hooking up with Katie, a new student in the class. Regina, who had a sense of crisis, chose to take the initiative at this time in order to catch Mike's attention. Thank you. Mike didn't know that Regina had so many little thoughts. After thanking her, he nodded to Karen, who winked at him and took little George with him to the football field. That's Regina, a celebrity in the school. Your damn popularity with women is really enviable. Little George reluctantly withdrew his gaze and said, although the 3 people in the devil figure group didn't look at him directly, but being able to get in such close contact with the 3 beautiful girls still made little George very excited. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Training. Damn, is he ignoring me? How dare he? Regina saw Mike calmly passing by her, and the smile on her face froze, and she felt like she was gritting her teeth. In the eyes of this queen bee, she would not accept anyone ignoring her. That would be a blasphemy against her charm. Karen saw that the situation was not right, and knew how dangerous it was to be hated by Regina. So, she hurried to help Mike explain. Calm down, Regina. No one will ignore your beauty. Mike might be nervous, because he just joined the team. Regina looked at Karen with a questioning look, and she also saw the little gestures that Mike made when interacting with Karen just now. However, between admitting that she lacked charm and believing that Mike was blind, she was more willing to believe the latter. Glancing at Mike's back, Regina said generously, "Forget it, considering that he just joined the team. I will forgive him once." After that, Regina played with her long golden hair and proudly returned to the cheerleading team. Big Sam, who was warming up on the court, saw Regina and the other 2 actually approached Mike, and his eyes were red with jealousy. He had originally had some conflicts with George because he couldn't stand the performance of the genius Sheldon in school. Because of this, the 2 had a fight on the court, and Mike was the one brought to the team by George, so Sam, who was straightforward, naturally hated Mike as well. Now, seeing Mike talking to the goddess in his mind, the flame of jealousy in Sam's heart burned fiercely. The big man turned his eyes and came to the captain, who was doing warm-up exercises alone, whispering, "Aaron, that new guy dared to peek at Regina's beauty. Do you want me to help you teach him a lesson?" As the captain of the football team, Aaron and the cheerleader Regina must be a natural match in the eyes of others. Moreover, there were indeed some rumors about the 2 before, but they have never been confirmed by the parties involved. Although Sam looks silly, his approach to Aaron is very smart. If he is lucky, he might be able to get Aaron to go with him to deal with Mike. Once Aaron, the captain and quarterback of the football team, wants to deal with Mike, Mike and George's life in the team will not be easy. Of course, for Sam's plans to succeed, the premise must be that Aaron really has something with Regina. However, after listening to Sam's words, Aaron frowned and said, "Regina and I are not the kind of relationship you think. Also, Mike is someone the coach values. I hope you don't mess with him." Aaron, who knows Sam's character, naturally doesn't want the other party to affect the team's training because of some off-field things. It can be said that Aaron is a person who really likes football, and he also attaches great importance to Mike, a talented newcomer. Sam, who found himself boring, secretly despised Aaron in his heart, but flattered on his face to make a promise that he would never cause trouble for Mike. Looking at Sam's back as he left, Aaron shook his head with a helpless expression. Football is not a one-person sport. If you want the team to achieve good results, the team atmosphere and cohesion are very important. If it is not, because the team is short of people, there is no need to keep a troublemaker like Sam. On the other side, when Mike and George were stretching, Coach George came to them with his new whistle on his neck. The whistle, which was golden in the sun, was the little gift Mike gave to George yesterday. After signaling George to continue warming up, Coach George looked at Mike and asked, "Mike, how much do you know about football?" "I have almost learned all the rules on the court from George," Mike replied. "Very good." George was very satisfied with Mike's performance of being prepared in advance. Then, he asked in more detail, "How much do you know about running backs?" Running backs. On the offensive side, running backs are usually lined up in the backfield, usually receiving the ball from the quarterback and gaining yards by rushing. Running backs are usually divided into two types: power running backs and flexible running backs. Power running back, strong body, can use body to rush to get a short yard, so often used as a battering ram in short yards. Agile running back, usually not too much requirement for body size, but need to have better speed and flexibility, good at finding a large number of yards on the outside. In the current team, the big man Sam is a power running back. Mike, on the other hand, is more inclined to be an agile running back. Mike recalled the explanation given to him by George in the self-study class and said the correct answer. Good. Coach George smiled and continued to ask, "Then how much do you know about safety?" Safety. On the defensive side, the safety is usually standing at the back of the team as the team's last line of defense. Mike said the correct answer again. Very good. Wear this team uniform during training later. George shook out a large blue t-shirt with the number 20 marked in yellow font. Look at the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. On the football field, there are strict requirements for the uniforms worn by each player. The numbers 20 to 49 are exactly the numbers that the offensive running backs, half running backs, and offensive backs, cornerbacks, safeties, should wear. It seems that Coach George has already considered the position that Mike will play on the field. After Mike put on the uniform, Coach George in the middle of the field also blew the whistle to assemble. After the personnel gathered, Mike took a rough look and found that the school football team had about 100 people. However, a large part of this team wore uniforms without numbers. Obviously, these people are students who are preparing to cheat for credits. When the official game is played, they will not be sent to the field, commonly known as the atmosphere group. Over there, Sam was also in the crowd and saw Mike wearing a number 20 jersey. Seeing that the other party had his own exclusive jersey on the second day of his arrival, the big man's expression became a little uglier. Next, the team conducted a physical training that lasted for an hour. During this period, the players with numbers on their bodies will be more strict with themselves during training. As for those students who are just trying to get credits, they can go to the side to rest when they are tired. Mike's physical fitness is over 100, which is top notch among these kids, who are 16 or 17 years old. Although an hour of high intensity training made him breathless, he also felt refreshed. Just when Mike was wiping his sweat and taking a rest, a figure suddenly bumped into him. Mike, who was caught off guard, staggered. After stabilizing himself, he looked back and saw a burly team member looking at this side with a smug look on his face. The man was wearing the number 21 team uniform. Seeing that Mike was not knocked down, the man was a little surprised, but still provocatively said, "Boy, don't think that you can be proud just because Coach George is optimistic about you. Be careful next time." After the man finished speaking, he didn't care about Mike's reaction. While no one was paying attention to this side, he blended into the crowd again. Chapter 16 Conflict. In the crowd, George saw everything that happened. He came to Mike and said, "His name is Sam. He is a bully. Many new players in the team have been bullied by him. People with bad personalities like Sam are very good at using their own advantages to disgust others. Such people usually do not make big mistakes, but they keep doing small things in private. If you are targeted by such people and you ignore them, they will probably think that you are easy to bully and will stick to you like a dogskin plaster in the future." George knew that Sam was difficult to deal with, so he asked, "Do you need me to tell the coach about what happened just now?" Mike found Sam, who was smug in the crowd. He smiled and said, "No, I can handle such a small matter myself." Okay. George also felt that it was very ungentlemanly to tell the parents. He suggested, "If he comes to bother you again, remember to tell me. I have some personal grudges with him that have not been resolved." Last time, George and Sam had a conflict on the court because of Sheldon. Although the fight was suppressed by the coach, the two of them had a grudge because of it. When George was talking, the break was just over. Next, it was time for the players to have confrontational training. After Coach George arranged the training content, he called Mike aside and prepared to explain the confrontational skills to him. At this time, Sam left his training opponent and came over, pretending to be kind. "Coach, it's useless to just talk without practice. I'm willing to help this new teammate adapt to the rules on the court faster." He patted his chest while speaking, with a simple and honest look on his face. People who didn't know would really think that he really wanted to help Mike. However, Coach George also knew some of Sam's character and knew that the other party was not so kind. Although the other party said it with a solemn oath, Coach George still planned to help Mike refuse. However, Mike and Sam looked at each other and saw the malicious look in each other's eyes. So, he smiled and said, "Coach, this student is right. Actual combat is the best teacher." Seeing Mike also said so, Coach George shook his head and said, "Okay, if you insist." After obtaining the coach's consent, Mike and Sam put on protective helmets and came to the field. "Boy, I admire your courage." Sam, wearing a helmet, said in a muffled voice, "I will be gentle in a while." Mike could tell from the voice that the other party must have a look on his face that he had won. He hooked his fingers and took 2 small light balls from the excited Sam. Strength attribute +5, speed attribute +3. Although such a single attribute cannot immediately increase Mike's physique. However, with these attributes, Mike only needs a little training, and his physique can easily break through the upper limit. From this point of view, this seemingly powerful Sam is also a good leak. Seeing that Mike didn't respond to his provocation for a long time, Sam continued, "As a novice, you need to practice how to defend first. Next, I will attack you. Be careful not to get knocked away." Sam had no intention of introducing confrontation skills to Mike. While talking, he was ready for the collision. Mike didn't care about Sam's attitude at all. He spread his legs, leaned forward slightly, and raised his arms, making a posture to meet the enemy. Because of the demon body, Mike was not afraid of confrontation at all, which was why he agreed to Sam's proposal. Soon the two of them collided with each other. Mike turned around to relieve the force, but was caught by Sam's small movements. Then, the two of them slowly turned from the initial wrestling to a fight. Sam was more experienced, and Mike was more agile and more aggressive. After a contact, it can be said that neither of them got the upper hand. Just as Sam retreated and prepared for the second attack, Mike's voice came to his ears. "Is this all you can do? Didn't you have lunch?" The light words were full of mockery. Sam, who was already a little annoyed because he didn't get the upper hand, got angry when he heard Mike say that. "Asshole, that was just an appetizer. Next, let me teach you how to respect your seniors." Sam roared, leaned forward, and hit Mike with his hard helmet. In football, hitting someone with a helmet is the worst foul. Mike had learned the rules of football from George. Seeing that the opponent used such a despicable trick to deal with him, Mike didn't intend to indulge him. It can be said that Mike was waiting for this moment. Within the rules, Mike might not be a match for an old player like Sam for the time being. But if he didn't follow the rules, Mike was not afraid of the opponent. Seeing Sam hitting him with his helmet, Mike pretended not to know that it was a foul, and his hands were still doing defensive movements. In fact, his center of gravity had already shifted to the left side of his body, and his right leg was ready to attack at any time. Bang, the two collided again, and the sound was particularly loud this time. Mike endured the severe pain in his arm, and kicked the opponent's crotch with his right leg. With a cry of ouch, Sam crawled on the ground like a shrimp, holding his crotch. Because his cry was too miserable, everyone on the field was attracted. Mike didn't care about other people's eyes. He pretended to be angry, took off his helmet, and approached Sam while cursing. "I'll kill you while you're sick." Seeing the unfriendly look in Mike's eyes, Captain Aaron hurried over and stood between the two. Without waiting for Aaron to speak, Mike said coldly, "Get out of the way." Aaron had noticed this before and knew that Sam had committed a foul first. The mild-mannered captain was stunned by Mike's yelling. Mike took advantage of Aaron's daze and walked past him. When he came to Sam, Mike leaned over and took off his helmet. Ignoring the other party's painful expression, Mike raised his helmet and hit him hard in the face. Sam, with several teeth flying out and blood all over his face, was now only terrified and helpless. Hearing Sam's wailing, Aaron also reacted at this time, and he quickly gathered the players to separate Mike. When things stabilized, Coach George came late, and he asked anxiously, "What's going on?" In fact, Coach George had been paying attention to Mike before. When he saw Sam hitting someone with his helmet, he wanted to come over to stop it. As a result, before he came over to stop it, he saw Mike's counterattack. Seeing that Mike did not suffer, Coach George, who already had a personal preference, chose to come over a step slower. Hearing the coach's question, Captain Aaron said truthfully, "It seems that Sam first angered Mike by fouling. Then the two had a conflict, and the result was like this." Coach George did not ask more questions. After checking Sam's injuries, he immediately asked Aaron to take people to send Sam to the school hospital. Seeing the miserable state of Sam, the evil man, when he was sent away, many players who had been bullied by him all showed expressions of gloating. Little George in the crowd gave Mike a thumbs up. After Sam was sent away, Coach George continued to ask, "Tell me, what happened?" Chapter 17, Preparing for Confrontation. Mike explained the incident in detail, mainly highlighting 2 points. First, the other party deliberately bullied him as a newcomer. Second, the other party started it first, and he was fighting back. To put it bluntly, Mike had thought about it in advance and wanted to minimize his responsibility. The players around him all knew Sam's character, and they all agreed with Mike's self-defense. Little George, who was standing by, saw the whole thing. Although he felt that Mike's counterattack was a bit too much, he still stood up in the end and was willing to be a witness for Mike. At this time, the beautiful girls on the cheerleading team also heard about what happened on the court. After they knew that Mike had beaten Sam, the big fool, into the hospital, their eyes changed when they looked at each other. "He is so handsome and can fight. That is full of security." Regina saw the little bitches around her, who seemed to want to eat Mike's eyes, and she felt annoyed for no reason. Mike, the prey, was obviously about to get out of her control. On the other side, seeing Mike's clever answer, Coach George nodded slightly and said, "Okay, think about how to deal with the principal. This matter may not be over yet." After giving Mike a few more subtle reminders, seeing that the time was almost up, Coach George asked everyone not to discuss the matter anymore and officially announced the end of today's training. Mike dealt with a few players who came to get close to him and pulled Little George and said, "Come on, accompany me to the infirmary." Seeing Mike's calm face, Little George couldn't figure out his thoughts and said in surprise, "Sam has been sent to the hospital by you, and you are not going to let him go? You are a devil. What are you talking about? Do I look like a big villain?" Mike patted Little George's shoulder speechlessly and explained, "I'm going to get an injury assessment so that I can explain to the school leaders when the time comes." After that, Mike lifted up his team uniform, revealing large bruises on his ribs and waist. Seeing such serious bruises, George looked at Mike, who looked fine, and said admiringly, "You are a ruthless person." Mike said indifferently, "It's nothing. Sam's injury is more serious than mine." With the characteristic of demon body, Mike's minor injury is really nothing. Go back and have a good meal. Maybe he will recover on his own. Accompanied by George, Mike came to the infirmary, but he didn't see Sam. Even the teacher in the infirmary was about to go off work. Seeing the football uniforms worn by Mike and the other two, the infirmary teacher asked, "What's the matter with you? Your injured teammate has been sent to the town hospital." The infirmary teacher saw the clothes Mike and the other two were wearing, and obviously misunderstood them, thinking they were Sam's friends. "We are not here to visit the injured, but to do an injury assessment," Mike explained. After speaking, he lifted up the uniform again. The infirmary teacher still remembered Sam's injury. Seeing another player injured in the football team, he sighed, "Football is too dangerous." Then, the infirmary teacher briefly examined Mike and said with a smile, "Student, your injury looks serious, but it's just a skin injury. You'll be fine after a few days of rest." Compared to the last football player who was injured in a vital part, Mike's bruises were only minor injuries. Mike stretched out his arm and said, "Teacher, I may have a fractured arm. I need you to take a good look at it." Seeing that Mike's previous performance did not look like a fractured arm, the infirmary teacher frowned and took out a small hammer. Next, no matter where the teacher hit his arm, Mike insisted that it hurt. After repeating this several times, the infirmary teacher's frown spread and looked at Mike with a strange look. "Did you have a conflict with the injured football player before?" the infirmary teacher asked. Seeing that the infirmary teacher had guessed the answer, Mike had no intention of hiding it. He said generously that Senior Sam wanted to teach me, the newcomer of the team, a lesson. Because of the difference in ideas, we did have some minor frictions. The infirmary teacher was a little surprised by Mike's frankness. But relatively speaking, the handsome Mike did make people more likable. At this time, George was also fanning the flames and talking about Sam's usual evil deeds. At the same time, Mike also took the time to ask about Sam's injury. According to the infirmary teacher, Sam's injury was not very serious. As long as the lost teeth were filled in a while, he would be fine. "Teacher, do I need a cast for my arm?" Mike asked suggestively, after knowing Sam's injury. The infirmary teacher could not see the other party's intention. He shook his head. "I will give you an injury report in a while. As for the injury on your arm, a bandage should be enough." Mike expressed his gratitude for the reasonableness of the infirmary teacher. Finally, Mike, with an exaggerated bandage hanging around his neck and a report of his injury in his hand, left the school clinic with satisfaction. After returning home, seeing Mike's exaggerated look, Grandma Connie excitedly asked the reason. Mike did not hide it this time and told Sam what happened during the day. As Mike's temporary guardian, Grandma Connie immediately said that she would go to Sam to seek justice. Check out the correct version on 16,191 book 1 bar. In order to appease the excited Grandma Connie, Mike had to tell her the truth and his plan. Finally, he took off the bandage and moved his arms a few times to show that he was really fine. What a little sly guy, knowing that Mike did not suffer any loss. Grandma Connie laughed and scolded and said that even if she went to school, she would make the decision for Mike. That night, Mike and Grandma Connie did not go to Sheldon's house for dinner again. In the restaurant, to express his apology, Mike personally cooked a few special stir fries. The meal ended with the praise of Grandma Connie. Before going to bed, Mike received a call from Dennis. The other party had returned to St. Paul and called to let Mike know that he was safe. At the same time, he also asked if Mike had adapted to the new environment. Mike naturally said that everything was fine here, and Grandma Connie and little Sheldon's family were very kind to him. After reassuring Dennis, Mike finally said hello to Aunt Kelly, Dennis's lover, over the phone, before hanging up the phone. In the next 2 days, Mike played a full role and refused the team's training because of injury. The conflict between Mike and Sam on the football field was not suppressed because of Coach George's warning. Even because of Sam's previous evil deeds in school, after learning that he was sent to the hospital, those students who had been bullied by him had regarded Mike as a hero. Even the bandage hanging on Mike's neck was regarded as his medal. Many female students who did not know the matter also gathered around him again under the pretext of caring about Mike. "Mike, the class has set up a support group for you. If the school and Sam cause trouble for you, we will find a way to help you." During the self-study class, Lina, a beautiful girl in the same class, came to Mike and whispered. Before, these girls in the same class didn't bother Mike for a while because they were afraid of Regina's strength. Now, because of the beating incident, Mike has become a celebrity in the school. As Mike's popularity in the school increased, his female supporters were no longer so afraid of Regina. At the same time, in the principal's office, Principal Tom also called all of Mike's teachers together and asked them about Mike's performance in class. Chapter 18, Judgment. Although Mike has only been in school for a few days, his excellent performance in class has been recognized by teachers of various subjects. In addition, Mike, a genius, has an easygoing personality and is not as annoying as little Sheldon. This also makes several teachers prefer him. knowing that Principal Tom called a few people to deal with the school violence incident 2 days ago. Several teachers selectively said good things for Mike. Even the head teacher, Ms. Victoria, said that Mike is a good child. After collecting their opinions, Principal Tom nodded and let the teachers leave. Then, Mike was also called to the principal's office. Sam will bring his parents to school tomorrow to accuse you of intentional injury. I hope you are prepared. Principal Tom pinched his nose with a headache, and seeing Mike's well-behaved appearance, he continued, of course, if it turns out that you are innocent, the school will support you. In the past 2 days, Principal Tom also learned about Sam in the 12th grade. The other party's performance in school can be called a villain. Therefore, compared to the villain, the principal is more willing to help Mike, a good student. Thank you for the principal's concern. Mike received the other party's kindness and said, I will prove my innocence. Seeing Mike so confident, Principal Tom didn't ask any more questions. He nodded and sent him out of the office. The next day, someone leaked the news that the school was about to try Mike. So, many classmates gathered at the school gate spontaneously. After Mike and his guardian, Grandma Connie, entered the school, both sides of the road were full of students of various grades. Of course, most of them were girls. Mike, we support you. Lana led Mike's support group and shouted, as if welcoming a victorious general. Under their leadership, some students who had been bullied by Sam and some people who just wanted to watch the fun cheered. The scene was very lively. Grandma Connie dressed up specially today and wore the wide-brimmed sun hat that Mike gave her. Seeing such a lively scene on both sides, she smiled happily and waved to the enthusiastic classmates. After having enough of the star addiction, Grandma Connie whispered, Mike, I didn't expect you to be quite popular with girls in school, much better than little George. Mike didn't expect Grandma Connie to be so free and easy, so he could only nod reservedly. Look at the three over there, they have really good temperament and figure, not worse than female stars. Grandma Connie said, and raised her eyebrows to Mike, showing a smile that every man knows. Mike followed her gaze and saw the three people with devilish figures in the crowd, who were indeed very eye-catching. Seeing Mike looking over, Karen smiled and waved to him, causing the waves of her chest to rise and fall. Amid the cheers of the classmates, Mike and Grandma Connie entered the principal's office. Sam hadn't arrived yet. At this time, in addition to the principal, there were only Coach George and Miss Victoria with a stern face in the office. Seeing the principal, Grandma Connie's face immediately changed, and she seriously accused Mike of being treated unfairly in school. Principal Tom was a few years younger than Grandma Connie, and he was no match for the full-fire grandma. At this time, Sam also came to school with his father Gretel. Compared with Mike, who was only wearing a bandage, Sam looked much worse. Because of the severe injury in his crotch, he could only walk with his legs apart, and he staggered when he moved forward, just like a clumsy Donald Duck. Moreover, the injuries on his face had not subsided, and half of his face was swollen like a pig's head. However, Sam's miserable appearance did not get sympathy from the students. Those classmates who had been bullied by him and silently injured it shouted words such as coward and soft egg in the crowd. In the eyes of these classmates, going to parents after being bullied is a dishonorable behavior and a sign of weakness. Sam's father Gretel felt a contemptuous eyes on both sides. He looked at his son who walked like a duck beside him and cursed with disgust, useless thing. Then, he left Sam who was dawdling and walked quickly to the teaching building. Seeing Sam abandoned by his father, the students present cheered loudly, as if they had won again. On the other side, when Grandma Connie was scolding the school for not protecting Mike, Gretel pushed the door and walked in. This 1.9 meter tall strong man gave people a strong sense of oppression. He looked around the office, then stared at Mike and said angrily, "You beat my son into that state?" Seeing the real owner coming, Grandma Connie was not afraid at all, and pulled Mike forward and scolded, "Sam is your son, look at what your son has done." Grandma Connie pointed at the bandage on Mike's neck and continued, "Mike is such a good child, but because of your son, his arm was almost disabled. I don't know what sequelae there will be in the future. You have to be responsible for this." Gretel had come in aggressively before, but was weakened by Grandma Connie's rebuke. However, when he saw that Mike was fine, and even the bandage on his neck was tied into a beautiful bow, This made the 1.9 meter tall man feel a little funny and aggrieved. Just at this moment, the door of the office was pushed open again. Sam walked in with misty eyes and a pitiful face. Greet didn't care how much his son had just suffered outside. When he saw Sam's miserable appearance, he felt like he had found a savior. Pulling Sam, who had just entered the door, forward, Greet also said tit for tat, "Look at my son, how he was beaten." He first pointed to the wound on Sam's face, and then opened his son's mouth, revealing a mouth with several missing teeth. If the situation allowed, Greet even wanted to take off Sam's pants and play another wave of misery. Grandma Connie was first frightened by Sam's miserable appearance, and then she came to her senses and quietly gave Mike a thumbs up. Then, Grandma Connie argued, "Your son just lost a few teeth, but Mike almost lost his arm." For a while, the only sound in the principal's office was the quarrel between Grandma Connie and Greet. Enough. Principal Tom, whose head was buzzing with noise, slammed the table to quiet the two of them, and then looked at Gretel. "How do you want to solve your son's problem?" Gretel glared at Grandma Connie, then looked at Mike and said, "I want the school to expel this abuser, and want him to pay all of my son's medical expenses and mental damages." Hearing that the other party wanted the school to expel Mike, Grandma Connie got angry and said, "That's impossible." Principal Tom motioned for Grandma Connie to be quiet, and then asked Gretel again if she had anything to add. Then he looked at Grandma Connie and Mike. "What do you say?" Just when Grandma Connie was about to continue speaking, Mike took out the injury report, put it on the table, and said, "I'm very sorry for the conflict on the court, but I can guarantee that it was Sam who provoked me first, and it was he who attacked me first." At this point, Mike looked at Greet and continued, "If you don't want to reconcile, we can call the police now. Believe me, with the injury report, the best result for you is to prove that Sam and I fought each other and were sent to jail at the same time." Greet didn't react to hearing Mike's words, but Sam was frightened first. At this time, Coach George also said that there were players on the court who could prove that Sam was the first to attack. He also pointed out that Sam's use of a helmet to hit people was a very immoral behavior. Chapter 19 Status. As the party involved, Sam clearly knew that he was the one who provoked the opponent first on the court. Now all signs indicate that he was at fault, especially he did not expect that Mike actually brought the injury assessment report. Sam, who was originally a bully, was frightened by the illusion deliberately created by Mike, and said in panic, I agree to reconcile, don't call the police." As he spoke, the scene suddenly became quiet. As a representative of the school, Principal Tom also breathed a sigh of relief. You know, it is not a good thing for a vicious incident on campus to be exposed. On the other hand, Greet did not really think that the school could expel Mike. He just wanted to take advantage of his son's injury to make the other party pay more money. As a result, seeing his son so disappointing, he cursed in an unlucky way. Waste. Then he slammed the door and left the principal's office alone without caring about Sam's feelings. Sam, a child without a father's love, was left alone to face the covetous eyes of Mike and others, and felt that his body became smaller. He looked at Principal Tom and asked carefully, "Principal, can I take a few more days of sick leave in my current state?" Principal Tom saw the pitiful look of the other party and felt some sympathy. He said, "Go, kid, I have approved your sick leave. Come back when you recover from your injury." At this point, the conflict between Mike and Sam came to a perfect end. Mike waited for Sam and his son to leave, hooked his fingers, and took the several light balls they left behind. Physique attribute +1, strength attribute +5, injury resistance attribute +3. Among them, the main attribute of strength was left by Greet when he left. It seems that the other party was very angry today. Then, Mike also left the office with Grandma Connie in a relaxed manner. Facing the expectant eyes of the students in the corridor, Grandma Connie said happily, "Thank you for your concern. Mike is fine now. We won. Long live X," and the students who stayed here were waiting for this good news. They cheered immediately, as if justice had defeated evil. Principal Tom heard the cheers outside the door, shook his head helplessly, then pushed open the door and shouted, "Don't you have to go to class? What grade are you in?" With the principal's roar, the students in the corridor quickly fled. The school returned to its former peace. Grandma Connie also smiled and waved to Mike, and left the school in a chic manner. Mike sent Grandma Connie away, turned around, and found that Lina, who was in the same class, and several other girls were hiding aside, and had not left yet. So, Mike returned to the classroom surrounded by these girls from the support group. Originally, Mike was naturally rejected by his classmates as a top student. However, after this fight, the boys in the class looked at him with a little more kindness. Only little Sheldon was a little unhappy because Mike affected his study during class time. However, Mike also became famous this time and officially became a celebrity in the school. At lunchtime, Lina led several girls from the support group and found Mike again, inviting him to have lunch together. In school, popularity represents status. Mike agreed to Lina's invitation, and a group of people rushed past in a mighty manner, becoming the most beautiful scenery on campus. Dan, who was hiding in the library and enjoying his lunch with Sheldon, saw Mike's beautiful appearance and envied him. "I wish I could have so many girls like me." Sheldon glanced at Mike's departing back and said disdainfully, "Being with those simple-minded people will not make Mike's lunch more delicious." Dan looked at Sheldon in surprise and complained in his heart, "Can't Sheldon only see the lunch and not see those girls being attentive to Mike?" In the school cafeteria, Katie saw so many people around Mike, and she didn't go over to join in the fun. She also knew about Mike's troubles these days, but she couldn't help, so she could only care silently on the side. Of course, because Katie was getting more and more confident, she also made 2 new friends in the class these 2 days. One is Janice, a punk girl who doesn't like men, and the other is Damien, a sissy who doesn't like women. Both of them are also not tolerated by other groups in the class because of their own quirks. Seeing Katie staring at the dazzling Mike in the crowd, the sissy Damien said, "If you like him, you should seize the opportunity. If you don't take action." At this point, Damien made a shy expression and said, "I don't know if he likes men." No, Katie shivered with goosebumps and warned, "Mike likes girls." The punk girl Janice also despised Damien and said to the emotional Katie, "Damien may be disgusting, but what he said is right. If you like him, you should act quickly." Then, Janice pointed to a location and continued, "I heard that Queen Bee Regina is very interested in Mike. The correct version is in the 16-9 book forum." Katie looked in the direction Janice pointed and saw the 3 people of the devil figure group. Among them, Regina was staring at Mike in the crowd with a burning gaze. On the other side, although Regina had her usual smile on her face, she was cursing in a low voice. "Those damn bitches, they actually dared to approach Mike. They are just like flies." Then, she said to Karen, who was standing next to her, "Have you found out which girl Mike is closest to in school?" Karen replied in a low voice, "Mike is very self-disciplined in school, but he is closer to Katie, a transfer student in our class." "Katie? Who is that?" The beautiful Regina, who was alone, asked in confusion. So Karen had to point Regina in a direction with a headache. Regina turned her head and looked at Katie, who happened to meet her eyes. Both girls kept smiling and turned their eyes away at the same time. Regina said nonchalantly, "It turned out to be that little bitch from the country. You should pay more attention to her in the future and report to me immediately if there is any situation." Seeing this, Karen and Gretchen could only nod in agreement. On the other side, Katie felt the pressure after she looked away. However, when she thought about Mike coming to visit her at the weekend, she smiled again. And she decided in her heart that she must leave a good impression on Mike at the weekend. Mike, on his part, didn't know about the 12th grade girls because he had already had a conflict. After he accompanied Lina to finish lunch, he chatted with Lina about some family matters in the afternoon self-study class. Now Lina is not only the leader of Mike's fan club, but also one of the most popular girls in the 11th grade with her extraordinary beauty. Of course, Mike is willing to contact her, not just for her appearance. When the two were chatting, Mike also picked up a few thinking attributes from her. It turns out that Mike is also a gentleman who pays attention to inner beauty. In the afternoon outdoor exercise class, Mike also removed the bandage hanging on his neck and joined the rugby training again. Chapter 20 Daily Life. The bandage hanging around Mike's neck was originally a disguise. Now that the fight has been resolved, he naturally doesn't need to pretend anymore. Because of the previous conflict on the court, Coach George personally taught Mike football common sense today. Football experience plus 10. Football experience plus 8. Football experience plus 5. Coach George is like a rich experience package. When he teaches football experience seriously, small balls of light are constantly coming out of his body. Not long after, Mike's football level reached level 2, and he has reached the level where he can play in the game. And this is not the end. As the players on the court began to do confrontational training, Mike also picked up a lot of balls of light from them. Strength attribute plus 3, speed attribute plus 1, football experience plus 2. Exercise of a certain intensity can produce endorphins, which will make people feel happy unconsciously. This sense of pleasure will make the players continue to contribute small balls of light to Mike. Coach George gave Mike an hour of theoretical lessons, and then called Aaron, who has a gentle personality, over. After explaining a few more things to Captain Aaron, Coach George asked Mike to follow him and do confrontational training on the court. Compared to Sam's arrogance, Captain Aaron was much gentler. He first introduced the key points and tricks in collision to Mike, and then asked Mike to be the attacker and he to be the defender, and started the training. Another hour passed, and Coach George announced the end of the training. Today happened to be Friday. Hearing the order to disband, the players cheered and ran out of the court. Aaron patted Mike's arm and said, "You have great potential in football. If you have any questions in the future, you can always come to me. Of course, if you want to practice more on the weekend, you can also call me." He smiled and waved to Mike, and then Captain Aaron carried his tool bag and left the court. It can be seen that after an hour of sparring, the football captain has recognized Mike. Not long after Aaron left, George came over and asked familiarly, "What were you discussing just now?" "Nothing, it was all about training," Mike replied. Hearing that it was not interesting, George shook his head at first, and then suddenly said happily, "Come to my house tonight, we can secretly drink Grandma Connor's wine." Every weekend, George and Mary would leave their children and go out to spend some time alone. At this time, George and his children would ask Grandma Connie to take care of them. With Grandma Connie's generous character, George and his 3 children could do many things that their parents usually did not allow during this period. Mike's appointment with Katie was not until tomorrow, and thinking that he had nothing to do tonight, he was ready to accept George's invitation. At this time, Lena appeared at the side of the court. When she saw Mike, her eyes lit up, and she ran over. "Mike, are you free later? I have 2 movie tickets here." Because she ran too fast, Lena was still a little out of breath, but she still showed a cheerful smile on her face. George looked at Lena's beautiful and moving appearance, glared at Mike with jealousy, and then stepped back 2 steps tactfully. "Okay, wait for me to change my clothes." Mike hesitated for only a second, and chose to accept Lena's invitation. After Mike took a simple shower in the dressing room, he had lost the shadow of George when he came out, and Lena was waiting at the door. Looking at the thin shirt on Mike's body that was stuck to his body because he didn't wipe off the water drops, Lena swallowed her saliva unconvincingly. The movie tickets for the 2 of them were from 6 to 8 o'clock, and it was only 5:30 now, so they were in a hurry. So, the 2 finally decided to walk to the cinema. Along the way, Lena chirped like a happy bird. The 2 chatted while walking, and finally arrived at the cinema at nearly 6 o'clock. Because it was the weekend, there were many people in the cinema today. Mike took the initiative to buy a large box of popcorn and 2 cups of Coke, and then entered the screening room. August Love is a popcorn movie, and it can also be regarded as a love movie. Mike and Lena's seats are relatively close to the side, and I don't know if this girl did it on purpose. The people sitting next to them are almost all young couples. After the screening room darkened, the music in my ears started. Mike felt the girl's breathing getting heavier. Mike was originally a gentleman, but after Jennifer's experience, he was quite familiar with the current situation. After 2 hours, Mike had no idea what the movie was about. When they walked out of the cinema, the sun had not yet set. Lena's face was still slightly flushed, but compared to the charming scene in the screening room, she had regained her cheerful look. Mike sent Lena home tacitly. The girl's home was quite remote. However, the independent apartment in front of them looked much more luxurious than Connor's grandmother's house. A correct version was found in the 16:9 book forum. There was also a heavy-duty old car parked at the door of the apartment. My family has a small ranch, and my parents should still be working on the ranch. Lina licked her lips and said charmingly, do you want to come in and sit down? Women are fickle, and Mike called her a little fairy in his heart. However, he adhered to the 3-time principle, 3 dates to get a home run. Next time. Definitely next time. Mike has already reached first base today, and his progress is just right. Looking at Mike's back as he left, Lina stamped her feet. She also knew that it might be difficult to bind Mike to herself so quickly. Mike, on his part, had never thought of hanging himself on a tree so early. Although he felt a little sorry for Lina, he still chose to play the long game. When he got home, it was already dark. Mike saw that there was no light at Connor's grandma's house, but little Sheldon's house was very lively. Thinking that Grandma Connie should still be at little Sheldon's house, Mike also walked to the opposite door. When he entered the yard, he saw little George setting off firecrackers one by one. Seeing Mike come back so early, little George was a little surprised and said, why, didn't you play with Lina for a while? As the class flower in the 11th grade, Lina is also quite famous. No. Mike shook his head. Is Grandma Connie here? Yes, she is playing with Sheldon. Seeing that Mike didn't want to talk about Lina, George said, the house is full of old people and children. Do you want to set off firecrackers with me? I can give you a few. Forget it, I'd better go see Grandma Connie. Mike said that he had no interest in setting off firecrackers. After entering the room, Mike happened to see Grandma Connie cheating and winning all the chips of little Sheldon by cheating. Gambling experience plus 100. Surprisingly, Mike's gambling skills have reached the entry level. Look who's back. Grandma Connie was in a gambling mood. She sent away little Sheldon, who had lost all his chips, looked at Mike, and asked, want to play a few games? I can lend you a few chips. No. Mike didn't touch gambling and drugs, and decisively rejected the other party's invitation. Chapter 21 Pull. In the room, Mike sat on the sofa with little Sheldon out of boredom, and watched the Science and Education channel. On the TV, a white-bearded old man was explaining the molecular structure. On the other side, Grandma Connie, who felt bored because no one was playing gambling with her, also put away her playing cards, took a bottle of beer from the refrigerator and sat over. Just as the three of them were speechless and enjoying the leisure time, Missy suddenly rushed out of the bedroom. She was wearing a loose black jacket, a pair of large sunglasses on her face, and a simulated guitar in her arms. She was full of rock style and shouted, Sheldon, listen to my latest creation. She originally wanted to come out to harass little Sheldon, but before she finished speaking, she saw Mike sitting on the sofa. Realizing that her ladylike image was about to collapse in front of Mike, Missy showed panic on her face. Before the three people on the sofa could react, she quickly hid back in the room and closed the door with a bang. What's wrong with her? Little Sheldon looked back and forth, with a puzzled look on his face. Grandma Connie shrugged and didn't answer Sheldon's question. After a while, Missy changed into a little bee costume with little wings and appeared in the living room again. She seemed to have lost her memory, with a cute expression on her face, holding a handful of candy, and came to Mike. Mike, why are you here? Do you want to try some candy? She didn't know that her deliberate cute look was also very cute. Thank you, Missy. Mike smiled and took 2 candies from the little girl. You're welcome, Missy responded ladylike, then pushed Sheldon aside and sat on the sofa next to Mike. Here, Mike just peeled a candy and was about to put it in his mouth. He saw little Sheldon, who was squeezed to the edge, looking at him eagerly. Do you want one too? Mike gestured. Little Sheldon swallowed his saliva and refused. Thank you, eating candy at night is not good for your teeth. After that, little Sheldon turned his head away proudly, but his stomach just happened to grumble. Children are prone to hunger when they are growing up. In addition, it was past mealtime, so Sheldon was obviously hungry. You haven't eaten yet, have you? Mike asked. Grandma Connie was a casual person, and when she heard Mike's question, she became interested. Do you want to make the small stir fry for that day? Grandma can help you. The small stir fry that Mike made 2 days ago left a deep impression on Grandma Connie. No, I'm not in the mood to cook today. Mike shook his head and then suggested, I can treat you to taquirt. Hearing that it was a taquirt, Grandma Connie lost interest and said that she would eat anything. What about you? What do you want to eat? Mike looked at the two eager children in the room. I want fried chicken. Lots and lots of fried chicken. Missy raised her hand happily in response. Little Sheldon thought for a while and recalled that the Vietnamese vegetables that Dan ate at noon every day looked good, so he said reservedly, I want to try Vietnamese vegetables, curry chicken nuggets or mustard flavored lobsters. It must be said that little Sheldon has a good memory and remembers all the hometown delicacies that Dan mentioned. Hi, George. We are going to order taquirt. What do you want to eat? Mike came to the door and shouted to George, who was still setting off firecrackers in the yard. Beef pizza with the sound of firecrackers. George came to the door. What did they order? Why don't I go buy it? I can save the errand fee. Mike had no objection. After giving the change to the other party, he told him what everyone wanted to eat. In less than half an hour, George came back with a big bag of food and a few bottles of beer. At the table, George opened a bottle of beer for himself and Mike. Grandma Connie just glanced and said nothing. When everyone was almost done eating, George and Mary, who had gone out for a private world, also drove back. When Mary saw that Grandma Connie took such good care of the children this time, she thanked her. On the other side, George found George, because the latter had two empty bottles in front of him. Mike gave George a helpless look and then followed Grandma Connie out of the Cooper family. Meanwhile, at Katie's house, she was choosing clothes in front of the closet, preparing for a family date tomorrow. Mom, come and see. How about this dress I wear tomorrow? Katie spent a long time choosing in front of the floor standing cabinet and finally chose a white miniskirt. This miniskirt is thin and close-fitting, more like a set of home pajamas. As soon as Katie's mother came in, she saw her daughter's hot dress and said tactfully, Katie, you are very beautiful in this dress, but it is not very dignified to wear it in front of outsiders. Mike is not an outsider, Katie muttered in a low voice. She wanted to leave a deep impression on Mike tomorrow because of the sense of urgency. Seeing her mother's reaction, Katie had already made up her mind. Okay, I know. Katie, who had made up her mind, didn't want to listen to her mother's nagging anymore and pushed her out of the bedroom in a coquettish manner. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. Looking at her daughter's closed door, Katie's mother also experienced her husband's feelings before. In the room, Katie tossed and turned with her pillow, unable to sleep. Finally, she took out her phone and called Mike. Hi, Mike. It's me. Katie deliberately lowered her voice. Katie, what's up? Mike had just finished washing up and passed by the living room when he received a call. Well, I just want to remind you, tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon, don't forget the time. Katie said nervously. Okay, I will be at your house on time tomorrow. Mike responded. Okay then. Good night, Mike. Have a good dream. Katie was silent for a while and said goodbye. Good night. Mike hung up the phone. Turning around, he saw Grandma Connie, who was still drinking beer in the living room, looking at this side with sparkling eyes. Mike, don't forget the small umbrella in the cabinet. You are still young, don't make a killing. Grandma Connie said with a hint of meaning. Although Mike is avant-garde, he still feels very embarrassed to talk about adult topics with Grandma Connie. He silently replied I know, and walked towards his room amidst the teasing laughter of Grandma Connie. At the same time, Regina and Karen were also on the phone, chatting about some private topics between besties. Before they knew it, they talked about Mike. Karen, why don't you call Mike and ask him to go shopping together tomorrow? Regina suggested, thinking of Mike's handsome face. Regina, you like Mike, why don't you call him in person to ask him out? Karen asked tentatively. In fact, both girls could vaguely feel that the other party was a little interested in Mike. Karen, under pressure from Regina, did not dare to show it. Regina, on the other hand, was concerned about her face and wanted to control the overall situation. No, he is still in my probation period. Regina expressed her feelings. You call him, and I will help you with reference here. In the devil figure group, Regina has always occupied a dominant position in the team because of her strong personality and the richest family. After receiving the order from the Queen Bee, Karen could only obey the order to open a three-way call and call Mike. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Scheming. Mike hung up the phone and just lay down comfortably in his room. Grandma Connie's voice came from the hall. "Mike, your phone. It's another girl calling." Then, Grandma Connie asked the other party's name and continued to shout to Mike. "She said her name is Karen. Got it, Grandma. I'll be there right away." Mike sat up and responded. When he walked out of the room, he saw Grandma Connie leaning against the wall, holding a beer in one hand and holding the phone in the other hand, chatting happily with the person on the other side. Seeing Mike coming, Grandma Connie handed the phone to him with a gossipy look on her face. "Karen is a good girl. You guys chat slowly. Grandma is going to sleep." After saying that, Grandma Connie showed a meaningful expression, then carried the beer and staggered back to the room. "Karen, you called so late. What's the matter?" Mike took the phone and sat on the sofa. "Nothing." On the other side, Karen, with big curly hair, was lying on the big pink bed, swinging her round legs. "Are you free tomorrow, Mike? We can go shopping, and Regina will come too." In the third party, Regina's bedroom, hugging a pillow, she was very satisfied when she heard Karen mention her. "It's not convenient tomorrow. I already have an appointment." Mike leaned on the sofa and said, "Damn, ask him who he's going to make an appointment with." "Which damn bitch?" Before Karen could speak, Regina, who was on the third party call in the microphone, immediately started to question. As a school celebrity, this was the first time Regina took the initiative to ask Mike out, but she found out that she had been beaten to it. The queen bee was obviously very unhappy at this moment. After comforting Regina, Karen changed the channel and asked curiously, "Mike, who was so lucky to date you first?" Although Mike didn't know what Karen was up to, he also knew the intrigues of some high school girls, so he was cautious not to expose Katie, but casually said, "A friend invited me to have a simple meal at her home." Karen could hear that Mike was trying to shirk, and she didn't ask any more questions. Regina, who was eavesdropping, said angrily, "Who asked him out? Was it those little bitches in the 11th grade, or Katie, that wild girl from the countryside?" In Regina's opinion, no girl in the school could compare to her, and no one could take away what she liked. Karen realized that Regina was very dissatisfied with Mike's answer, so she quickly changed the subject. "Mike, who do you think is the most beautiful girl in our school?" Hearing this question, Regina immediately became quiet. On the one hand, she was very confident, and on the other hand, she was very vain, and would not allow herself to lose to anyone. "Karen, you count as one." Mike's lazy voice came from the microphone. Hearing this answer, Karen was instantly excited, and even her swinging legs were unconsciously clamped together. However, thinking that Regina, who was monitoring the third person, also heard this answer, Karen became entangled again, and her index finger kept twisting her long golden hair. "Karen, if I stay with Mike, I have to go against Regina. This is too difficult on the other side." Regina snorted in dissatisfaction, calculating in her heart. Sure enough, Karen, this little bitch, secretly seduced Mike while I wasn't paying attention. Just when the two girls were thinking about their own thoughts and their friendship was about to break up, Mike continued, "Regina counts as one, and Gretchen. The three of you in the Devil Body group are all very beautiful. The three girls in the Devil Body group are indeed outstanding in terms of figure and appearance. Even if other girls in the school can compare with them in appearance, they are still far behind in terms of dressing and fashion temperament." Regina's anger subsided a lot when she heard Mike praise the Devil Body group, and she even felt a little proud. After all, the Devil Body group was created by Regina, the queen bee. Karen, on her side, felt a little disappointed when she heard Mike talking about her two besties again, but she was also relieved. "Karen, finally, I don't have to go against Regina." She had just finished riding the roller coaster, and while Regina didn't have any further instructions, she quickly said goodbye to Mike and ended the call. Looking at the phone that was hastily hung up in his hand, Mike was a little confused. He could clearly feel that the big wave girl had some ideas about him. Did I misunderstand? Mike touched his handsome face, shook his head, and didn't think about it anymore, and got up and walked towards the bedroom. On the other side, the two girls continued to talk. Tomorrow's shopping plan is cancelled. You and Gretchen go and find out who has made an appointment with Mike. Regina returned to her arrogant nature. Early the next morning, before Mike woke up, someone knocked on his door. Mike opened the door and unexpectedly saw Mary's family and Grandma Connie at the door. They were all dressed very decently today. Mary smiled devoutly and invited Mike. "We are going to church for worship. Do you want to go with us?" Mary is a Christian and firmly believes that God can give people happiness. "No, I have something else to do today." Mike refused decisively. He does not believe in anyone but himself. "Oh, that's a pity." Mary looked regretful. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. In her opinion, it is a glorious thing to be able to throw herself into the arms of the Lord. "Mom, can I not go to church like Mike? Scientific data proves that God does not exist at all." Little Sheldon pulled the corner of Mary's clothes and pleaded in a low voice. Missy and George looked at Mary expectantly when they saw this. In fact, except for Mary, the Cooper family is not a Christian. No. Mary rejected the children's request, and after preaching to Mike about the greatness of God, she took her family away. Grandma Connie walked at the back. Before leaving, she turned back and reminded him, "Mike, there is a secret barbecue made by Grandma in the refrigerator. If you are hungry, you can eat some. If you go out to play, you can also bring some to your friends." "Got it." Mike smiled and waved goodbye. After everyone left, Mike went back to his room to catch up on his sleep. It was not until the sun was high that he got up full of energy. After washing up, Mike changed into a decent casual outfit. He was over 1.8 meters tall, with a pair of long legs and a slender body. His neat hair was combed back, revealing his delicate facial features. Under the absolute control of his face, even the simple white t-shirt and black jeans on his body were worn by Mike with a sense of fashion. When he saw that the time was almost up, he packed some roast beef from the refrigerator and walked towards Katie's house. On the other side, in the solemn church, little Sheldon, who believed in science, had a disagreement with Pastor Jeff about whether God existed. Pastor Jeff tried to explain it with probability. There is a 50% probability that God exists or not. Little Sheldon immediately said, the smarter the person, the more he believes in science. In the end, Pastor Jeff gave an example. Mr. Darwin, the originator of the theory of evolution, was also a Christian. At this moment, little Sheldon, who couldn't think of how to refute the other party, could only sit back on the stool in disappointment. On the side, Grandma Mary and Grandma Connie felt that it was inappropriate for little Sheldon to debate with the pastor in the church. However, seeing how depressed little Sheldon was after losing the debate, they all became dissatisfied with Pastor Jeff. Chapter 23 Temptation. In Katie's bedroom, she was fixing her makeup at the dressing table while calling her new friend. In a basement, Janice, a punk girl with thick smoky makeup and dreadlocks, and Damien, a sissy in a pink t-shirt, were giving Katie advice. "Listen, Katie, if you really like Mike, you must seize this opportunity and win him over in one fell swoop." In the dark basement, Janice, a punk girl, sat cross-legged on a chair and said her opinion. "Right." Damien, half leaning against the workbench opposite, leaned over the phone and added, "I heard that Regina wanted to ask Mike out for shopping today, but he refused. If you can win Mike over, it is equivalent to indirectly defeating the Devil Body group. It's exciting to think about it. Come on, Katie, we all support you." Damien became more and more excited as he spoke, and finally encouraged Katie like a good girlfriend. "No, Mike and I are not in the relationship you think." Katie, who was sitting at the dressing table, shyly declined when she saw her two friends speaking so bluntly. Then, she asked with a guilty conscience, I mean, if I want to find a boyfriend, what should I do?" This time, the more she tried to hide her mistake, the more obvious it became. After hearing Katie's reply, the two people in the basement looked at each other in tacit understanding. Janice said, "First, you have to create an opportunity for the two of you to be alone. The atmosphere is very important." Believe me, a man and a woman in the same room, Mike will definitely not be able to resist your temptation. I've said it before, Mike and I have nothing. Katie still wanted to cover it up, but after hearing the snickering on the other end of the phone, she knew that it was meaningless to be stubborn. Okay, how to do it specifically? That's right, you have the opportunity to defeat the devil body group. You should feel honored. Janice smiled and continued to seduce. High school boys actually think about the same things. You dress hot today, take the opportunity to drink soup or serve coffee, wet his clothes, and then suggest that he go to the bathroom to clean up. Finally, you dress sexy and make a surprise attack. By the way, Mike looks good. You will definitely not suffer a loss. Janice said vividly, as if she had become a relationship expert. On the other side, Katie listened to the other party's description, and her mind couldn't help but think of the scene of Mike taking a bath. Her cheeks suddenly flushed, and her misty eyes seemed to be able to draw silk. Later, she fanned her face with her hands to dispel the heat and said, "It's almost time, I'll hang up first." After ending the call, Katie sat in front of the dressing table for a long time, until she calmed down a little. Then she walked out of the bedroom. In the living room, Katie's mother had prepared a sumptuous lunch, waiting for the guests to arrive. Katie's father sat aside with a calm face, holding a newspaper in his hand, pretending to kill time. As soon as Katie came out, the two of them focused their attention on her. "Isn't our daughter's outfit too casual today?" Katie's father covered her face with a newspaper and whispered, "Compared to the short skirt yesterday, this figure is already very good." Katie's mother answered her husband, then stood up and greeted her daughter. "Katie, did you drink secretly in the room? Why is your face so red?" Katie's mother sat down again, noticed her daughter's flushed face, and asked worriedly. "Mom," Katie said coquettishly. To ease the embarrassment, she pulled the white shirt on her body to get some fresh air and explained, "Maybe it's too hot today, I'm still a little uncomfortable." The weather in Texas in August is really hot, and Katie's explanation makes sense. And because Katie was a little bit uncomfortable, she didn't wear the seductive short skirt she prepared last night today. However, the black shirt she is wearing now has a visual sense of missing lower body because of its length. Overall, the temptation to boys is still full. Just when Katie's father wanted to remind his daughter of her clothes in a subtle way, there was a knock on the door. "I'll go open the door." Katie jumped up and ran to the door with her two big white legs shaking. A certain old father, looking at his daughter's happy look, stood there with his mouth half open, as if he was cast into a fixed position. "Well, this is the first time that Katie has friends coming to visit us. You should be careful and don't scare the guests." Seeing her husband's depressed look, Katie's mother counseled him. HMPH. Katie's father slammed the newspaper on the table, frowned, and acted like a grandfather to express his dissatisfaction. At the door, Mike was a little surprised when he saw Katie's outfit today. She had simple double ponytails on her head and some light makeup on her face, which made her look cute and beautiful. Of course, these are not the main points. Katie's wide black body, at a glance, showed her delicate collarbone and round thighs, which gave people a lot of room for imagination. "This is Grandma Connie's special Texas barbecue. I don't know if it suits your taste." Mike picked up the packaged roast beef and said with a smile. Looking at Mike in front of her, Katie's face couldn't help but blush again when their eyes met. She took the beef in a daze and invited him with a dodgy look in her eyes. "Come in quickly, my parents are waiting for you inside." After saying that, she immediately turned around and led the way. In fact, she didn't need to lead the way at all. As soon as Mike entered the door, he saw a middle-aged couple sitting in the living room. The hostess had a gentle smile on her face, and the middle-aged man next to him looked very old-fashioned. The two of them were wearing neat professional suits at home, which didn't match Katie's style. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. Katie led Mike to the dining table and introduced him to her parents. Then, she handed the gift Mike brought to her mother. "Well, it smells good." Katie's mother first praised the gift Mike brought and then said, "Mike, you sit down first. I'll go and deal with the beef, and then we'll have dinner." It has to be said that humans are visual animals. Mike's handsome appearance made Katie's mother have a good impression of him. Seeing her mother's friendly attitude towards Mike, Katie also smiled. However, she was beside Mike at the moment, and her whole body became sensitive, as if there was a warm current in her body. In order not to make a fool of herself, she quickly said, "I'll go to the kitchen to help." So, the mother and daughter left the table together, leaving the two men staring at each other. "Your name is Mike, right? Are you in the same class as our Katie?" Katie's father narrowed his eyes, as if he was interrogating a prisoner. "I'm an 11th grader, one grade lower than Katie." Mike saw the dissatisfaction of the man opposite, but he said he could understand the other party's feelings. "That means you are 1 year younger than our Katie?" Katie's father's eyes were full of inquiry. Mike didn't think much and nodded slightly. Katie's father seemed to be dissatisfied with Mike's age, frowned, and continued to ask, "Can you smoke and drink?" A little bit. Mike gestured with his thumb and index finger, and responded modestly, "Want one?" Katie's father pretended to be proficient, and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, and was about to smoke. "Thank you, I'm not addicted to smoking." Mike waved his hand to refuse. Seeing that Mike didn't take the cigarette, Katie's father's face looked a little better. Then, he lit a cigarette for himself, held it in his hand, and said in a serious tone, "Who is in your family, and where do they work?" Seeing that Katie's father was about to check the household registration, Mike's face became visibly serious. Chapter 24 Father and Daughter. Just as the atmosphere between the two men in the living room became more and more tense, Katie and her mother came out of the kitchen. "Dad, how come I didn't know you could smoke?" Katie said in surprise. Katie's father was startled and quickly put out his cigarette, covering up. "Smoking is not a good habit. I'm criticizing it. As a field biologist, Katie's father actually doesn't smoke at all." His pack of cigarettes was completely prepared for Mike, so that Mike can be labeled as a bad boy. But it seems that his plan has failed. Biology experience plus 100. Mike hooked his finger and picked up the light bulb dropped by Katie's father. The other party now has a daughter slave mouth, and he seems to have become a different person from his indifferent performance just now. "You should explain to your mother." Katie walked around him and sat next to Mike. Although she didn't know what happened outside just now, judging from Mike's expression, the two men's time alone did not seem to be pleasant. Katie's mother also glared at her husband, with a warning in her eyes. Then, she put the cut beef on the table and warmly invited Mike to eat. With Katie's mother mediating, the atmosphere at the table gradually improved. Soon, Katie's mother talked about her family's life in Africa. Because of the entry-level knowledge of biology, Mike can occasionally communicate with Katie's mother, a biology expert. On the side, Katie's father was a little surprised by Mike's erudition, and his opinion of him became better. After the meal, Mike's relationship with Katie's family seemed to be much more harmonious. After cleaning up the tableau, Katie took the opportunity when her mother was going to make tea, and suggested, "Mom, you go and rest, I'll take care of it here." She recalled Janice's idea in her mind, and wanted to create an opportunity for herself and Mike to be alone. Looking at her daughter's expectant eyes, Katie's mother understood the other party's thoughts. After all, she was young too. Moreover, she was quite satisfied with such a handsome guy like Mike. "Okay, since Mike is here for the first time, you can take him to see our collection." Katie's mother smiled and was about to ask her husband to leave. "I haven't finished reading the newspaper yet." Katie's father picked up the newspaper and looked like he was going to stay in the hall. Katie's mother knew that her husband wanted to monitor Mike here, so she turned her head and stared at him. "Okay, I'll go back to the room." Under the threat of his wife, Katie's father stood up and told Katie before leaving, "Baby, if you have any troubles, you must tell Dad." Katie's father, who was pulled back to the room, changed his attitude again. He paced back and forth irritably. "That stinky boy has a pretty face. It's obvious that he is not a good person." "Calm down." Katie's mother pressed her husband to the stool and said, "I think Mike is fine. Nothing will happen to him." In the living room, after her parents left, Katie became restrained. Thinking of Janice's idea, Katie asked softly, "Mike, what do you want to drink? Tea or juice?" "Thank you, I'm not thirsty." Mike sat opposite Katie and answered with a smile. The first step of the plan was blocked, making Katie feel a little disappointed, and then she could only suggest, "Why don't I take you to see my parents' collections?" Katie, compared to the collections, don't you have anything to say to me? Mike showed a gentle expression, trying to break the window paper between the two. Maybe Mike would not be so proactive at ordinary times, but this time Katie's father's intentional or unintentional targeting made him feel a little rebellious, and it seemed that a ball of evil fire was suppressed in his chest. And today Katie was dressed so charmingly, her thoughts were written on her face. How could Mike not see it? Being considerate is also a gentleman's character. Katie looked at Mike's charming eyes, and she felt that all the strength in her body was drained, and the whole person was light, as if walking on clouds. Just when the atmosphere gradually became ambiguous and pink bubbles appeared in the air, they suddenly heard a violent cough. It turned out to be Katie's father, who was worried about his daughter being alone with Mike, and returned to the living room again. I was careless, Mike sighed secretly, and the charming feelings in his heart had subsided. Katie was caught by her father, and felt a little embarrassed. However, when she saw Mike's evasive movements, her inner depression overwhelmed her embarrassment. She had prepared for so long, just to get closer to Mike. But she was interrupted at the critical moment, and the atmosphere was gone. What are you doing here? Katie, who was in adolescence, was very angry. Katie's father was defeated by his daughter's angry eyes, and made an excuse. I came out to wash some fruit to eat. Do you want some? Facing his daughter's speechless expression, Katie's father knew that his excuse was very bad, so he could only smile ingratiatingly. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. It is just as the saying goes, one thing conquers another. In the following, Katie's father would appear in front of Mike from time to time, facing his daughter's disgusted eyes. His surveillance behavior was no longer concealed. Mike, who was being stared at, was very uncomfortable. After picking up a few light balls on Katie's body, he said goodbye to her. Looking at Mike's leaving back, Katie lost her spirit. Obviously, this family invitation was not successful in her opinion. Are you satisfied now? Katie turned around and glared at her father, who was pretending to drink water, but was actually gloating. That kid is guilty of his crime. What does it have to do with me? If he wants to leave. Katie's father forced an explanation, and then warned, Katie, I tell you, you should stay away from those pretty boys in the future. They all have bad intentions. Katie's father deliberately put eye drops on Mike, but he didn't notice that his daughter didn't listen to a word. You have bad intentions. Katie roared, ran back to the room in grievance, and slammed the door heavily. Katie's father put down the water cup, was stunned for a while, and finally thought of his daughter's red eyes when she left, sighed, and was about to go and enlighten the other party. Okay, let her be quiet for a while. Katie's mother appeared in the living room, and stopped her husband. Katie's father, who was having a headache, could not help complaining when he saw his wife coming. It's obvious that the boy had bad intentions, but how come I ended up looking like a bad guy? I told you to stay out of my daughter's business. Can you keep her by your side forever? Katie's mother shook her head and persuaded. Thinking of his daughter's abnormal behavior after seeing Mike, Katie's father realized that his daughter had really grown up. After accepting this fact, he finally slumped down in a chair with a depressed heart. On the other side, Mike had just returned home when he was caught by Grandma Connie, who was drinking in the living room. What's wrong, our great lover? Why are you back so early? Grandma Connie saw that Mike was in a bad mood and asked in a joking tone. Nothing. Mike shook his head and didn't want to talk about his own affairs. Then, he sat opposite Grandma Connie, poured himself a glass of vodka, and said, what about you? What interesting things happened today? Mike knew that where little Sheldon was, there would be accidents. Now, only little Sheldon can provide Mike's main attribute of intelligence, so knowing more about him will make it easier to get more money from him in the future. On the other side, Grandma Connie has a drinking buddy, and she is happy to share with Mike the debate between little Sheldon and Pastor Jeff in the church. Finally, Grandma Connie also condemned Pastor Jeff's behavior of bullying the weak. Chapter 25. Does God exist? In the remaining time of the afternoon, Mike went to the yard to find a cool place, and did several sets of high-intensity physical training. Because of the existence of the demon body, Mike did not have to worry about physical fatigue and hidden injuries. Continuous exercise made his physical fitness grow little by little, and the positive feedback of the system also made Mike enjoy it. After several sets of exercises, it was almost evening. Mike wiped the sweat off his face, took a short rest, and returned to the room, and found that Grandma Connie was still drinking in the hall. Drink less alcohol, it's not good for your health. Looking at the empty bottles in front of her, Mike couldn't help but persuade her. It's okay, Grandma knows it. Grandma Connie was already a little drunk, but her head was still sober. It's strange to say that Grandma Connie is over 70 years old, and she is always smoking and drinking every day, but her body is still very strong. Seeing that the other party was indeed fine, Mike didn't say much. After a simple wash in the bathroom, he went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. There is tenderloin in the refrigerator. Grandma wants to eat fish-flavored pork shreds. Remember to add more sugar. Grandma Connie smiled and reminded Mike when she saw him cooking. Okay, Mike answered and walked into the kitchen. But before he started cooking, Grandma Connie in the hall received a call for help from Mary. George had to go to the hospital because he was not feeling well. Mary was worried that no one would take care of the 3 children at home, so she asked Grandma Connie to go over and help take care of them. Knowing that she was not good at taking care of people, Grandma Connie asked Mike to go to Sheldon's house together. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Sheldon and the other 2, all sitting on the sofa with a look of trepidation. George's pale face with his hands covering his heart was seen by them. George's father, as the pillar of the family, suddenly fell down, which made the 3 children very worried. Grandma, George's father will be fine. Little Sheldon saw Grandma Connie coming over and hurriedly sought psychological comfort from her. Little George and Missy also looked at Grandma Connie expectantly, as if she controlled George's life and death. Don't worry, George is so strong, he will be fine. Grandma Connie calmed down and comforted the 3 children. In fact, she was a little unsure in her heart. Thinking of Mary's anxious tone before, it was obvious that George's situation was not optimistic this time. Seeing that the whole family had lost their sense of proportion, Mike also spoke to comfort them. Then, seeing that everyone had not eaten dinner yet, he took on the task of making dinner. After Mike's reminder, Grandma Connie calmed down. After leaving little George to watch TV with his younger brothers and sisters, she followed Mike to the kitchen. Although she was willing to help, Grandma Connie looked a little drunk and was not competent for the job of helping. What's more, she had something on her mind. Connie, you go out to accompany little Sheldon and the others. Just leave this to me. Mike saw that the other party was getting more and more troubled, so he made a suggestion. Seeing Mike's responsible look at the critical moment, Grandma Connie was a little moved. If Mike was not here, she would probably not be able to think of how to take care of the 3 worried little guys. Thank you. Grandma Connie hugged Mike and thanked him. After sending Grandma Connie away, Mike quickly prepared several of his specialties. In order to cater to everyone's taste, he also made the fish-flavored pork shreds sweeter. Until dinner, the 3 Cooper children had not yet broken free from their negative emotions. Grandma Connie was thinking about George, and her mood was a little heavy. She realized that, because of prejudice over the years, she rarely showed concern for her son-in-law George. The atmosphere at the table was very dull, and Mike had no good solution for this. Mike, do you think God really exists? Little Sheldon thought of what happened in the church in the morning. He believed that it was his doubts about God that caused his family to suffer. George's illness was the best explanation. With all these associations, little Sheldon, a person who believed in science, could not help but doubt himself. Mike did not understand little Sheldon's brain circuit. He thought about it seriously and responded, God, maybe there is. Jennifer's existence proves that there are demons in this world. Since there are demons, it is reasonable for God to exist. Although he was dissatisfied with some of Mike's actions, little Sheldon was sure that Mike was the only smart person in the family. After hearing Mike's answer, little Sheldon fell silent. After a while, his tangled little face relaxed. If God really exists, it's a good thing. I'll ask him for forgiveness. After that, little Sheldon threw down his knife and fork, walked aside and prayed seriously. Others seemed to be used to his weird behavior. I don't know if little Sheldon's prayer worked. After a while, the phone at home rang. Everyone looked at Grandma Connie and found that there were several empty bottles in front of her, and she was lying on the table. Maybe because of the guilt in her heart, she was drunk. When the three children didn't know how to deal with the current situation, Mike walked over and picked up the phone. A correct version of the book in 1619. It was indeed Mary's call. She said that George was still in a coma and the situation was very bad. In addition, she asked worriedly about the situation of the three children at home. Mike told her that there was nothing wrong at home and she didn't need to worry, and then ended the call. Facing the expectant eyes of the three children, Mike told them about George's situation. How could this happen? Little George and Missy felt even more depressed. When little Sheldon heard the news, he once again doubted the existence of God. If God really existed, he should have heard his prayers. This won't work, little George said worriedly. I want to go to the hospital to see him. As soon as he said this, he was immediately approved by little Sheldon and Missy. To go to the hospital to visit George, you have to drive. Several people shifted their attention to the dining table, where Grandma Connie was sleeping soundly. I know where the keys are, Missy said, and went to Grandma Connie, and in a few seconds she took out a bunch of keys from her pocket. Great, let's go now. Little George grabbed the car keys and was about to go out. Wait, little Sheldon is not an ordinary child. If Grandma wakes up and finds that we are not there, she will definitely be worried and may even call the police. Let's leave her a note. As he said this, little Sheldon was about to run back to the room to find paper and pen. Wait a minute, Mike stopped little Sheldon and explained to the three children, if Grandma Connie knew that we were going to the hospital to see George, she would definitely not stop us. We should wake her up and ask for her opinion. Although little Sheldon was thoughtful, he was still a child after all, and his thinking was limited. Before the three children thought about it, Mike woke up Grandma Connie. What's wrong? What happened? Grandma Connie asked with narrowed eyes. Obviously she was not sober yet. Mike told her what they were going to do. Well, we should go to the hospital to see George. Grandma Connie got up with difficulty. I'll drive you now. Seeing that the other party was still drunk, Mike said he could drive. Then he took the key from little George. Grandma Connie knew that she was not in good condition, so she didn't force it. She chose to sit in the co-pilot seat and pointed Mike in the direction. The group arrived at the hospital smoothly. Mary, who was waiting outside the intensive care unit, saw her family coming, and her expression on her face was also relieved. After learning about George's father's situation, young Sheldon happened to find a small church in the aisle and decided to believe in God again. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.